build on the work of the SNP government to create a modern, diverse, dynamic Scotland that will ensure opportunity for all of her citizens. I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence.
Voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling station a little earlier, and the Lib Dems' Ed Davey, he was also at a polling station, as well as Reform Party leader Richard Tice, who was out casting his vote this morning. Today could be the warmest day of the year so far after heavy rain and thunderstorms hit southern parts of England and Wales overnight. 2 buildings in Sussex were damaged by lightning strikes, according to West Sussex Fire and Rescue. A care home in Elmer was struck with damage to its roof, while a university building in Chichester sustained damage to its roof and power system. Storms hit the southeast, southwest and Wales. The Met Office has warned storms might cause travel disruption and some flooding, leading to difficult driving conditions and some road closures. In other news, students have set up sit-in camps at some UK universities to protest Israel's war against Hamas. Students in Leeds, Newcastle and Bristol set up tents outside campus buildings in protest against the war in Gaza. It comes amid violent clashes between the police and protesters at universities in the US. Hundreds of riot police are on the UCLA campus in Los Angeles today as protests continue. About 300 people were arrested during police crackdowns on demonstrations at US universities yesterday. Now, Donald Trump's been threatened with jail as he returns back to court later. The former US president will face another hearing on further alleged breaches of a gag order. Earlier in the week, he was fined over £7,000 for multiple breaches of different gag orders, with the judge suggesting he could be jailed if further breaches continued. US political analyst Eric Ham says Donald Trump is in a face-off with the judge today.
What will certainly send many people in a tizzy is, in fact, if there's a way to actually jail Donald Trump. There are many who believe that it's nearly impossible to actually place a former president in jail because of the fact that there is a Secret Service duty to actually to protect him. So, of course, many people would be watching to see if, in fact, the judge is willing to go that far. And I think what we're seeing here is Donald Trump and this judge in a face-off to actually determine who actually wins, because I think what we're seeing take place is a game of chicken between both of these men right now.
And the Prince and Princess of Wales have released a photograph of their daughter to mark her 9th birthday. Catherine took the photo of Princess Charlotte with a beaming smile. It comes as the family continues to navigate Catherine's cancer treatment. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, we begin the show with some breaking news coming to us in the last hour.
Yes, a 36-year-old man has appeared in court, charged with the murder after a 14-year-old boy was killed in a samurai sword attack in East London on Tuesday.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, joins us now. Mark, you're outside the court. What have we learned?
Well, Marcus Aurelio Monzo appeared here at Westminster Magistrates Court some 2 days after this deadly attack in East London. He was driven to the court in a police van which was escorted by 2 other police vans. He appeared in court number 1 here at Westminster Magistrates, and he spoke only to confirm his name. He wore a prison-issue grey tracksuit. Now, the Crown say that he is charged with a number of offences. He's charged with murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of grievous bodily harm, a count of aggravated burglary and also one count of possessing a bladed article. According to the prosecution, this defendant crashed his van into a garage in Lane Close, which is not far from Hainault Tube Station, just before 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Then they alleged that a series of attacks took place. That the first victim was attacked outside and struck in the neck by what the Crown say was a samurai sword. The second victim, according to the Crown, was attacked in their own bedroom. The third victim, 14-year-old schoolboy Daniel Ajuran, was attacked and fatally injured with a wound to the neck outside his home address. And then 2 police officers, according to the Crown as well, were attacked and seriously injured. This defendant, as I say, spoke only to confirm his name. He's been remanded back into custody and will appear in court, this time the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, on the 7th of May, although the prosecutors here did say they were trying to see whether they could get a court slot for this man to appear tomorrow, but failing that, it will be on the 7th of May at the Central Criminal Court for the Crown Court appearance of this man accused of a deadly attack in East London on Tuesday morning.
So, Mark, it seems they're attempting to expedite this process as quickly as possible.
Yes, as always, when you have a serious case like this, the Crown Court appearance is normally as quickly as possible after that main magistrates' court. It is an indictable offence, a charge of murder, attempted murder and other serious offences, so it can only be heard at a Crown Court, and it normally happens within a few days of the magistrates' court hearing. But as I say, they are trying to get that expedited and to appear at the Old Bailey by tomorrow morning. But for the time being, this man is expected to leave court again under police escort back into custody to await that Crown Court appearance.
Really fascinating, Mark, the list of charges, including aggravated burglary. Lots of people on the day of the incident were bemused as to why on earth this could be happening. Was this random assault? What on earth was going on here? It seems that the police, at least, or the Crown Prosecution Service, at least, believes that burglary may have been a part of all of this.
Yes, I mean, now that the case is active, of course, and there are very strict rules that we have to obey, especially with a magistrates' court hearing, but we can certainly say that it is part of the Crown's case that this man, having, according to the Crown, crashed his van into Lane Close, then set about allegedly attacking individuals, and one of that or those incidents unfolded inside a property with a man assaulted in his own bedroom. So that is part of the Crown prosecution case that will eventually go to trial at some point in the future. 5 people, of course, injured in total in this deadly attack on Saturday, and this 14-year-old schoolboy fatally injured as a result of that blow to the neck with what the Crown said was a samurai sword.
Thank you very much indeed. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. Good to speak to you. Thank you. And we've seen pictures of the 14-year-old boy who lost his life in this incident. He was described as a true scholar by the school that he went to. His teachers, his family have been pictured as well. Truly shocking and deeply sad.
But in other news, tensions continue to rise as Ireland's government has confirmed that there'll be no Irish police deployed to the border on the island. But of course, this all comes after there had been news of deployment to police near the border.
Yes, near the border. And now this, of course, comes following Ireland's Justice Minister claiming there had been an upsurge in asylum seekers crossing the border following the passing of the UK's Safety of Rwanda Act.
Well, our very own political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us now because, Olivia, a lot of people were frankly bemused when this first news came out that police would be being deployed to the border. Subsequent clarification that means sort of the area around the border. But of course, it led to some pretty harsh words from our own Prime Minister.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is turning into a really ugly row, and we're getting into some quite important semantics here. So essentially what happened is Ireland has seen a huge influx of migrants crossing over from the UK. And the way they're getting in is over the Irish border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Now, obviously, that border is very, very controversial for all sorts of reasons. And under the Windsor framework and the Brexit withdrawal agreement, etc., there can be no hard checks at that border. That's what Dublin and Belfast and Britain signed up to. And any hard checks at that border would be in contravening the Good Friday Agreement as well as the Brexit withdrawal agreement. So obviously eyebrows were very much raised here in the UK when the Irish Prime Minister suggested that troops could be deployed to that border in order to stop about 100 troops deployed to that border in order to stop migrants crossing over from Northern Ireland, which is obviously part of the UK, to Southern Ireland. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and Rishi Sunak immediately asked for clarification from the Irish government, and the Irish government clarified that although they wouldn't rule out sending troops to near the border area to stop those migrants crossing the border, it wouldn't be a case of police actually policing that border. Now, if that sounds a little bit complicated and tortuous to you, then that's not really surprising. It is complicated, it is tortuous, and I think that if we get into a situation where troops are in the border area watching, finding out whether people are crossing the border and stopping them cross that border, then I think there will be a lot of questions about whether the terms of the Good Friday Agreement are being adhered to.
Thanks very much indeed, Olivia Utley, GB News political correspondent. Good to speak to you. And of course, Tom, it's the Irish. They've been clearing out those tent cities in Dublin. I'm not sure where they're planning to put all of the migrants. They, of course, want to send them back to the United Kingdom if they can do so. But at the moment, our government is standing firm and saying absolutely not. But it's very interesting, deploying police officers in near border areas.
Could you imagine if it was the UK government saying a similar thing? The uproar.
Yeah.
The uproar. 100 police officers to, quote-unquote, near the border.
Near the border.
Well, let's speak now with immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal for more on this, because, Harjap, this is becoming a bit of a crisis between what the Irish government is saying, what the UK government is saying. I suppose, though, there is politics at the heart of all of this. It very well suits the Irish government to claim that it's UK policy causing an influx of migrants to the Republic of Ireland, when that may not be actually the case.
Well, it's a political standoff, technically. And there's been growing sentiment in Ireland. We've seen a lot of people doing marches against anti-immigration and sort of Irish pushback from the Irish people that we don't want immigrants. However, Ireland is part of the EU. It will have to process asylum seekers that land on its shores. Now, Ireland seems to be blaming the UK as why are you letting these people cross the border from Northern Ireland? And it's interesting as to how an asylum seeker gets to Northern Ireland in the first place, because they all land at the Kent coast that we know. So how are they actually getting off from, ferries to Northern Ireland in the first place, or via planes, or, which way? That needs to be investigated. Once again, that's a lack of security on our part, because if people are going to Northern Ireland from England or, say, Scotland, then there's a possibility that people are coming from Ireland and Northern Ireland, or they were coming to England as well. So what technically now is going to happen is Ireland are saying we're going to send these people back to the UK. The UK is saying, well, no, actually, if that's the case, then we can send them all back to France, which is something which the EU is opposed to. So this will be very interesting to see how this standoff sort of plays out. I mean, but putting a police men on the border is a very clear signal of intent from the Irish government that it will be tough on immigration, and perhaps it won't allow immigrants. And that will be interesting how it plays out with its EU counterparts, because recently they've been speaking tough, due to their vote banks. but actually they're bound to accept these asylum seekers and process their claims.
Yeah, absolutely. It does look like a statement of intent. I want to ask you about another story that's in the press today. Civil servants threatening to scupper the Rwanda plan. You've got a union that represents some senior civil servants. They're launching their first legal challenge against the legislation. They're saying that essentially civil servants could be in violation of the Civil Service Code by going through with this legislation and in enacting it through the Home Office. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they stand a chance of actually bringing down the Rwanda scheme?
I don't think they'll bring the scheme down, essentially, because but what their argument is, we're being asked to do something which the UK Supreme Court has ruled will hold on, it might be illegal, and the government has legislated otherwise on. However, it will be interesting to see how this affects their employment rights. The government will say, well, if you don't like it, you can resign, you know. But we've got this legislation, it's through, it's law, and we've sent somebody on a flight, and, you know, we've got it all clear. So the government will argue that aspect. The civil service will say, well, hold on, if we go on strike, then you've got no machinery. Once again, it just shows how badly the Home Office is run. I mean, if you've got a good boss, the employees do the work for you. They keep everyone, if you keep...
Well, hang on, they might be ideologically opposed to the scheme. They might be ideologically opposed to the scheme.
Yeah, they might be ideologically opposed to the scheme, but however, there's plenty of things that people are ideologically opposed to, but we still have to do it for yourselves. You have to read a news report, which, you know, you might be ideologically opposed to, but you still do it because you're getting paid to do that. So the argument will be there. They'll say, well, hold on, we think this is unlawful, you know, and we don't think we can... we should be forced to do this. The government will say, well, you're being paid to do a job.
Looks a bit like political activism to me, Harjap. Yeah. We're going to have to leave it there. We're going to have to leave it there. Immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal, always good to speak to you on all matters to do with immigration.
Well, coming up next, students in the UK have set up sit-in camps across our universities. We're going to be live at one of them.
Good grief.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza, and also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased, Adam, I agree.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, to be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that phrasing. I think it's
extreme.
It's a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 12. Now, students in the UK have set up sit-in camps across universities to protest Israel's war with Hamas.
Yes, there are reports coming in from Leeds, Sheffield and Newcastle too. So is this gaining momentum?
Well, this is after 300 people were arrested in New York alone over pro-Palestinian protests yesterday. So what's going on with all of these protests? They seem to be spreading from university city to university city, from country to country.
Yes, shall we talk to the director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, about all this? Peter, your reaction to what we're seeing. So we've seen the riot police get involved in campuses in the United States. We've seen hundreds of students barricade themselves into buildings, claiming that they are pro-Palestine protesters. We're now seeing in this country a little bit of copycat.
We indeed are seeing that, Emily, but I would say that really for many of these people, I would say for most of these people, it's not really about Palestine at all. What we've seen over the past 6 months, whether it be on campuses like we're seeing now, or indeed in the demonstrations that we've seen in London on a regular basis, is a kind of alliance between the hard left and Islamist fundamentalists. And what they have in common is a hatred for their own societies. They have a hatred for Britain. They have a hatred for America. They have a hatred, in fact, for Western civilization. And so I think that this is the thing that binds them all together. This is the motivating factor in all of this. And it is the result, frankly, of years of indoctrination that basically these students, from the time that they were at school, have just learned that our countries, which, let's face it, are the most successful, the freest, the richest countries in history, we are in fact the cause of everything that is evil in the world. Israel is a kind of proxy for that, at the very, very most. We have seen time and again on social media, and indeed on your channel, the level of ignorance about the actual situation between Israel and Gaza amongst many of these protesters. They don't even know really what's going on, many of them. They are motivated more than anything by a kind of hatred for what they are themselves and a hatred for their societies. That's why it's growing, because, in fact, this has taken root right across the West.
Yes, and Peter, it's so interesting you talk about the success, the wealth, the freedom of the countries across the West, because perhaps there is a paradox there, that it is that very freedom that created that wealth and that success of countries like the United Kingdom and the United States. It's that same freedom that surely grants the right of many people to protest, even in an ugly or ahistorical way.
Yes, you're quite right there, Tom, on paper. But the fact is that this generation is unique, I think. Certainly compared to when we were at university or whatever, in that they don't particularly believe in free speech. Poll after poll shows this. It's very, very worrying. They don't believe in those fundamental foundations of what our democracy is about, what it's actually founded on. Free speech being, I'd say, the most important. They don't particularly believe in it. For them, their idea of what they would call hate speech trumps everything else. They don't allow other forms of speech. They deplatform. These protests you're seeing, particularly in America, and obviously they're coming here now, they're very strict it seems, on who they allow into their camps, and you've got to be absolutely ideologically pure. I think it's a huge worry. I think the problem is, this is what we're facing going forward. The majority of our governments, of our political class over years and years, have always been infected with a kind of self-loathing, right? But the very nicest way of putting it is that they've been complacent about it. They don't quite understand it. All of our institutions, our universities, our schools, our cultural institutions, they have all been pretty much captured.
I guess you could call it progressive authoritarianism. But Peter, I must put to you, what do you say to, I'm sure there are many protesters on these campuses in the United States and also here in the UK at our universities who claim that all they want is peace and that they're protesting against violence, they're protesting against deaths in Gaza?
No, they don't want peace. They want to destroy us. It's as simple as that, Emily. They don't actually care about peace. They are very, very selective in what they choose to have protests about. I don't see many protests about human rights abuses in China. I don't see any protests about the way that, say, like gay people are treated under Islamic regimes in Islamic countries. None. Never. Nothing.
And I haven't seen protests against Hamas, really, on the same scale.
Of course not. They're now actually being quite open and talking about Hamas as being freedom fighters. You're hearing this. You're hearing it on the steps of American colleges. You will hear it here too if you haven't already. Many of the people don't even understand what from the river to the sea means. This is profoundly important, Emily, for our future. And changing this is actually going to be a generation-long thing. I'll just add one more thing for my point here, and that is that when you look at these demonstrations, you never see a Union flag, you never see an American flag. They would be, absolutely scorned. However, when you go on a demonstration like I have, pro-Israel demonstration some months ago, there were many Union Jacks. It was done in a different kind of paradigm, if you like. These people are an alliance between the hard left and Islamists, and they basically, what they want more than anything is the destruction of who we are.
Well, Peter Whittle, I'm sure many, many people listening will be in resolute agreement with you there. Director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, thank you for your thoughts on what is a growing phenomenon.
Yes. It's pretty lame, though, that the students are just copying the tactics of what they're seeing in the United States.
I bet they're wishing that the police would come in riot gear. I don't think they will.
Just, they've all got these Instagram pages and their Twitter accounts are getting all excited. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We're Britain's news channel. Coming up, we're going to be discussing a new dispute between schools and parents after an independent school in Scotland reported parents for misgendering their own children. Curious. We'll have the news with Sophia first.
Emily, thank you. It's 12:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A Spanish-Brazilian national has appeared in court charged with the murder of schoolboy Daniel Anjorin in north-east London. Marcus Aurelio Adwini Monzo from Newham in London is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of grievous bodily harm. The prosecution alleges the defendant was armed with a samurai sword. Daniel was fatally injured as he walked to school on Tuesday morning. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were injured. 711 people were detected crossing the English Channel on Wednesday, the highest number on a single day so far this year, according to Home Office figures. It brings the total number who've crossed so far this year to nearly 8,300. That's 34% higher than the total at the same point last year. Former Deputy First Minister John Swinney has confirmed he's running to succeed Humza Yousaf as both SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister. If successful, it will be the second time Mr Swinney, who was Deputy First Minister for more than 8 years under Nicola Sturgeon, has led his party. He previously held the post between 2000 and 2004. And voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been seen out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling stations as well. And Lib Dems leader Ed Davey was at the polling stations this morning as well. And Reform Party leader Richard Tice was also seen out casting his vote. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
On the northbound side of the M6, there's a lane closure and queue in traffic to an accident from junctions 9 through to 10 for Wolverhampton. Delays to junction 8 for the M5 interchange. It's also very slow on the southbound side as traffic looks across. The eastbound side of the M27, a lane closure and slow traffic to an accident from 9 through to junction 10 for Wickham. On the M25, there's a lane closure in both directions, whilst emergency repairs continue from Sevenoaks at 5 through to the Clackett Lane services. At the moment, traffic is coping well, and it's coping well for the southbound side of the M1. But a reminder, the slip road from the services is blocked at London Gateway services whilst emergency repairs continue. And that's your very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I have to say, the jam issue
Yeah.
is
It's all very WI, isn't it?
Well, it's ridiculous. Now there's a picture of a friend of hers who's lying on the grass, cuddling a bowl in which the jam is placed in the middle with lemons round it, and a dog lying next to her. So she's holding this as if it's someone else that she really loves. I think, well, Meghan would have organised that because she'd have given her the present. I think this is too far. I mean, it's jam.
It's stupid as well.
Yes.
I mean, you know, if any of us were to bring out a product, you know, Isabella might associate with jam. No, you know, and I could see, you know, I could see how that would sticky work. jam. Yeah, but Meghan Markle, no, why? Well, what was her website called? Twiggy or Tiggy?
No,
or
I've
something
got it
back
down
in the
because I
day?
can't remember. America. Oh, Tig, the Tig. Yes,
Tig. She
yes.
used to be quite, you know, a lifestyle guru pre-Harry. So she's trying to go back to look at what I'm wearing, look at what I'm eating. I can get everybody to buy my product.
And what the chickens should have in my garden.
Mm. Do you actually think jam crosses her lips? Would No, you? of course, way too much
No,
sugar
but
in
they
there.
also say it comes from her garden. I mean, how many strawberries has she got? Does it mean 50 people, that's only enough for them? It's not going to have thousands of people asking for jam. We won't have it. And there is a thing that she was cross that, well, she said, jealousy, really, that King Charles brings in all the food and the jam, things to make from somewhere else. He doesn't do it himself or get his staff to do it. But he gives it all the money to charity, right?
Yes, yes.
All this money is for Meghan. And it's sold out. And people have thought, well, actually, if we are going to get jam, if that's what's trendy, let's get it from the king, not from Meghan.
Not her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's 12:38. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, an independent school in Scotland has come under fire after it had parents investigated by social workers after they fought teachers' attempts to affirm their daughter's transgender identity. So essentially, the school reported parents to the social services because they had been misgendering their child.
Well, George Watson's College in Edinburgh called social services in late 2020, so some years ago, after a long-running dispute with the parents who wanted to adopt a watchful waiting approach on the advice of psychologists. That's according to them. So was the school wrong to report them?
Well, we're joined now by the founder of Our Duty Group, who support parents around transgender issues, Keith Jordan. Keith, this is an interesting case, and I imagine it's something that a lot of parents and teachers have to deal with on a regular basis around the country. If a child turns up to school and they tell their teacher that their parents are misgendering them and they'd like to go by a different gender, a different name, etc., etc., can teachers then actually report those parents to the social services?
I think it's crazy that schools feel that they need to behave that way. Social services should really only be involved where there's a genuine safeguarding risk to the child. And the schools who believe in this idea that a child can be transgender have got this completely upside down. And I think a big problem that happened at this George Watson's College, I mean, this poor family have been enduring this for 4 years, trying to solve this problem. And all the while, the school has not been supporting the parents in their pursuit of the best interests of their child. That poor girl, as having the idea that she could be a boy, reinforced by the school, reinforced by LGBT Youth Scotland, against the wishes of the parents. And I'm glad to see in this particular case that social services took one look at it and said, yeah, no, fine, carry on as you were. Especially since that's occurring in Scotland, which we know has got a bit of a interesting history when it comes to dealing with transgender issues.
Isn't that the system working as intended, then? That there must be some examples of really horrific agony between disagreements with parents and children where it could get to a point of safeguarding concern. Can't you see a situation whereby it might be appropriate to refer that to an authority? In this case, clearly, it wasn't a concern. They passed it on. That was the system working.
In this instance, it did appear to work, yes. And I think the referral to social services was like a bump in the road on this really long journey that this family had been on. And I think the whole idea that the school even felt that it was within their remit to report to social services was wrong-headed.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because imagine if you were parents and you decided to take this watch and waiting approach to your child who's claiming they're a different gender and feelings of gender dysphoria and so on. You've decided this as parents, and then a school gets involved and you're reported to the social services. That does seem to me an outrageous overreach on the part of teachers.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's because these schools have got a complete misunderstanding of the nature of what happens when a child identifies as transgender. And that is because they've been told by organisations such as LGBT Youth Scotland that they need to, celebrate a child with a transgender identity. They need to affirm their identity. And of course, none of these things are true. That's only the belief of the ideology of organisations like LGBT Youth Scotland, and there are various other organisations dotted around the country selling the same snake oil. The reality is that if a child identifies as transgender at school, there has been a safeguarding failure. It might not have necessarily happened.
In every single case, Keith?
In every single case, I was going to qualify that by saying that safeguarding failure might not necessarily have occurred at school. It might have occurred in the privacy of that child's bedroom if they were online in spaces that are not helpful to them. But the moment a child starts thinking to themselves that they are transgender, something has already gone wrong.
That seems like quite an extreme comment to me. We all saw the tragic case of the murder of Brianna Ghey last year. She was a 16-year-old transgender girl. I think society accepted that she was a transgender girl at the age of 16. In your view, was she not?
No, indeed. In my view, he was a 16-year-old boy, and it's very tragic what happened to him.
Sorry, are you saying that Brianna Ghey was a 16-year-old boy?
Yes.
I think that's an appalling thing to say. An appalling thing.
Well, I'm sorry. It's I believe that's a statement of fact.
Well,
Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining us, Keith Jordan, who is the founder of our deputy group. A spokesman for George Watson's College, the school we're talking about, said social and gender transitioning are amongst the most challenging and polarising issues facing schools today. We've always worked collaboratively with parents and apologised to those involved in this case for any distress caused by what are difficult and challenging circumstances.
Well, much more to come on the programme, of course. Coming up next on the show, we'll be talking about magic mushrooms. They are more effective, apparently, at dealing with issues like depression than traditional medicines. Could that possibly be the case? Well, it's in the British Medical Journal.
Not sure. We'll see. We'll find out.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Many of us had some heavy thundery downpours overnight, and there's a risk of a bit more thunder to come as we go through today. We have low pressure to the southeast of the UK, and then a trailing front across southern parts of England and into Wales brings a lot more cloud as we go through today, and some further outbreaks of rain. Some of them could be a little bit thundery at times as we go through into the afternoon, but it's later on that we're going to see the heaviest thundery downpours. Further north, across much of northern England, Scotland and into Northern Ireland, a lot of bright, fine and at times sunny weather and some decent temperatures too. Some places getting into the low 20s, though a wind coming in from the North Sea will keep some northeastern parts a bit cooler. Like I said, some heavy thundery downpours developing across central parts as we go through this evening and into the start of the night could cause some localised problems. Further north though, and it's largely dry across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, some clear spells, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. In fact, under the clouds, some towns and cities will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start, though, across central southern parts as we go through Friday, and then a spell of rain pushing in from the east across northern parts of England, southern Scotland. Could be some thunder mixed in with this as well. However, to the north and the south of these areas of cloud and thundery rain, there's going to be some decent bright and sunny weather, and in any sunshine it should feel relatively warm for northern Scotland and southern England. Elsewhere, a bit cooler under the cloud and rain.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 minutes to 1. Now, here's an interesting one. Magic mushrooms are more effective at treating depression in pensioners than young people. That's according to a British Medical Journal study published this morning.
Yes, but should we start using these sorts of illegal drugs to treat these sorts of medical conditions? Well, we're joined now by former Home Office advisor Dr. David Nutt. David, thank you very much for joining us. Now, I'm reading the headline here, so bear with me. Magic mushrooms are more effective at treating depression in pensioners than young people. That doesn't tell us whether they are actually effective. How effective are they?
Well, that paper in the BMJ was what we call a meta-analysis. It looked at all the studies that have been done with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, so not mushrooms themselves, but the active ingredient. And they showed that a single dose of psilocybin is the most effective treatment we have for depression.
And this is fascinating because there are many people in this country who are very, very medicated on antidepressants, having to take them every single day. But with this treatment, it seems like that's not how it works at all. Just one or two occasions of taking this treatment could replace that consistent level of medication.
Exactly. That's why they're remarkable. And they are very, very different from conventional antidepressants. They work in a different part of the brain. They work on different receptor systems. And as you pointed out, they change the brain to produce long-lasting effects from a single administration, whereas the traditional antidepressants, they're a bit like wallpapering over a crack in a wall, whereas psychedelics are like rebuilding the wall.
David, any side effects?
Well, during the trip, people often get a headache and they often get nausea. Those are the two common side effects. But depressed people are well prepared to put up with that if it lifts this enormous burden of depression, which many of them have had for decades.
And how many people has this been tried on?
I think in that particular analysis, I think it was 460 patients. So it's a rather sizable number. And important to note that the effect of psilocybin was better in people who had failed on other treatments. So it's a lifeline for those people who have not responded to classic treatments.
And yet, psilocybin is, if I'm not mistaken, restricted by the government in what they call Schedule 1, where you need Home Office approval to even do medical trials with this. That's a more restrictive scheduling than heroin or cocaine, which seems like the most extraordinary level. Why is it classified like that?
Well, the answer is because in 1971, America told us to classify it like that, because America essentially classified psychedelics as the most dangerous drugs of all, because they were changing the way American youth were thinking about the Vietnam War. So these drugs were banned because they were seen as encouraging social protest against war. They were put into a category which made them impossible pretty much to work with the intention, I believe, of people not ever knowing that they were potential therapies. It was a way of trying to close the book on them. But thankfully, we've started to fight back. But it's really difficult. And what I would like to happen now is for our government to say, that was wrong. It's denied the possibility of research and treatment to millions of people. Move them out of Schedule 1, put them into Schedule 2, alongside medical cannabis, alongside codeine. Why don't we do that? And let doctors then really find out how useful they are in the hundreds of millions of patients.
I mean, people have argued that things like ecstasy and other Class A drugs can be good for things like depression and anxiety. Is this far less... magic mushrooms don't have as many potential harms, can't be addictive?
Correct. Yeah, and because we're in this really bizarre situation where we know about 1 million people a year use, maybe more now, use magic mushrooms. There's almost no evidence of harm. So we know that psilocybin is safe. And yet we're not allowed to use it because of this historical anomaly that it was thought to be dangerous 55 years ago.
There'll be people who say there's a slippery slope argument here, that if things are sort of granted medical use, people will be more likely to use these things in their personal lives, and that would be bad for society overall. What do you say to that argument?
Well, it's absurd for several reasons, not least of which there was never any evidence other than a political one for banning it in the first place. And in fact, what we know is that many of the studies that are being done with psilocybin now are based on research, questionnaire research that we and others have done in people who are using them recreationally and discovering that mushrooms can help them stop smoking. It can help them stop drinking. It can help them with mood. So even used recreationally, they're safe. And if you bring them into the clinic, they're very much safer.
I'm a bit sceptical. I remain sceptical, just the promise of this magic drug. But
no more magic than penicillin.
I'm intrigued, though. I am very intrigued. Thank you so much, Dr. David Nutt, former Home Office advisor there. Magic mushrooms could be the answer to your depression.
It's fantastic finding these new treatments.
I don't know, but people say all sorts, don't they, about all these different Class A drugs. Oh, it's going to help you out of your depression, or it's going to make you less anxious.
I don't
any
think
side effects, though? Any side effects?
I think if produced by scientists in the form of a pill rather than just, having a random mushroom.
Maybe. Well, would you take it? Would you take it at home? Let me know. But in other news, should you ever have to dumb down your accent to get a job? This is our question, because Welsh singer Bonnie Tyler said she did exactly that. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. Northern parts will stay dry as we go through the rest of today, but further south we have some thundery, showery rain, and that's in association with a front that's trailing across central parts at the moment. And we do have low pressure towards the southeast, and that's brought quite a blustery, breezy theme for many of us. But it is the heavy, perhaps thundery downpours across central parts of England and Wales as we go into the night that's most likely to cause some disruption in a few places. There will be quite a bit of cloud for many of us, but towards northern, northwestern parts of the UK, some clear skies. Despite these, though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Many towns and cities, especially where it stays cloudy, will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start then across some central parts as we go through into Friday. And also watch out for some showery outbreaks of rain which could turn thundery, pushing across northern parts of England and southern Scotland too. To the north of the areas of wet and cloudy weather, there'll be some decent sunshine, so for northern Scotland, and also to the south, so across southern parts of England, I'm expecting some bright sunny weather. And where we see some sunshine, it is going to feel pretty warm, but under the cloud and rain, feeling markedly cooler than it has done recently. As we go into Saturday and the weekend as a whole, there's a fair bit of uncertainty at the moment. It does look like it'll be quite cloudy with some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland and some showers feeding up from the south. And the risk of showers continues as we go through Sunday and into Bank Holiday Monday as well. Could turn heavy and possibly thundery at times.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. Prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 2nd of May.
Ireland orders police to man the border after ministers claimed migrants are flooding in from the UK. Rishi Sunak warns Dublin not to jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement.
Meanwhile, in London, dozens of masked protesters attempt to prevent a bus from moving migrants from a hotel to the Bibby Stockholm barge. It's kicking off, reportedly slashing tyres to stop the removal.
And continuity SNP candidate John Swinney throws his hat into the ring for the new leadership. He was Nicola Sturgeon's deputy and helped craft the failed coalition with the Greens. But could Kate Forbes shake things up this very afternoon with her own declaration?
Yes, we'll be following that for you.
And here's one for you. Have you ever held back your own accent?
Have I ever held back my own accent? I don't want to admit, but I probably have. I've probably tried to appear... I've got quite a posh accent, let's be honest. Let's be honest. There's no point denying it. And, you know, sometimes you might want to, I don't know, sort of reduce it slightly, temper it slightly.
It's like when George Osborne used to deliberately...
Put me on the spot there, Tom.
It's like when George Osborne used to drop his T's deliberately to sort of...
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. That's just ridiculous. But we're talking about this because a Welsh singer, Bonnie Tyler, has said that she did that. She tempered her Welsh accent in order to get work.
Yeah, which seems to me extraordinary because I think to some extent, perhaps, these days it's the other way round. I think very often people love to hear regional accents and there's a big push to hear much more of it, particularly in the media. But perhaps that wasn't so much the case 30 years ago.
Yeah. So we want to ask whether you would or should people temper their accent, tone it down if you've got a strong regional accent, in order to get on in your job, to get on in your career, to try and get a job in an industry where perhaps there aren't many regional accents. Do you think that's right? Is that an absolutely awful thing to do?
Yeah.
Is it fraud?
Or have you ever bigged up your accent?
Yeah.
Egged it on, sort of wanted to sound more unique, more different.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it.
I'm sure it might happen in the other way as well.
Well, we're going to be debating this in a little bit. We've got two people with very different opinions on whether you should. gbnews.com/your say. Let us know what you think. Have you ever tempered your accent, depending on the audience? Let us know. Let's get your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A Spanish-Brazilian national has appeared in court today, charged with the murder of schoolboy Daniel Angerin in north-east London. Marcus Aurelio Odwini Monzo from Newham in London is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of grievous bodily harm. The prosecution alleges the defendant was armed with a samurai sword. Daniel was fatally injured as he walked to school on Tuesday morning. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were injured. 711 people were detected crossing the English Channel on Wednesday, the highest number on a single day so far this year, according to Home Office figures. It brings the total number who've crossed so far this year to nearly 8,300. That's 34% higher than the total at the same point last year. Former Deputy First Minister John Swinney has confirmed he is running to succeed Humza Yousaf as both SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister. If successful, it will be the second time Mr Swinney, who was Deputy First Minister for more than 8 years under Nicola Sturgeon, has led his party. He previously held the post between 2000 and 2004. Speaking in Edinburgh a short time ago, he confirmed he would be in the running.
I want to build on the work of the SNP government to create a modern, diverse, dynamic Scotland that will ensure opportunity for all of her citizens. I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence.
Now, voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling station, and Lib Dems leader Ed Davey was also at the polling station this morning, as well as Reform Party leader Richard Tice, who was seen casting his vote. And today could be the warmest day of the year so far after heavy rain and thunderstorms hit southern parts of England and Wales overnight. 2 buildings in Sussex were damaged by lightning strikes, according to West Sussex Fire and Rescue. A care home in Elmer was struck with damage to its roof, while a university building in Chichester sustained damage to its roof and a power system. Storms hit the southeast, southwest and Wales. The Met Office warned storms might cause travel disruption and some flooding, leading to difficult driving conditions and some road closures. Now, violent clashes between the police and protesters at universities in the US continues today. Hundreds of riot police have moved in on protesters at the UCLA campus in Los Angeles. About 300 people were arrested during police crackdowns on demonstrations at US universities yesterday. Meanwhile, in the UK, students have set up sit-in camps at some universities to protest Israel's war against Hamas. Students in Leeds, Newcastle and Bristol set up tents outside campus buildings to protest against the war in Gaza. Donald Trump's been threatened with jail as he returns back to court. The former US president will face another hearing on further alleged breaches of a gag order. Earlier in the week, he was fined over £7,000 for multiple breaches of different gag orders, with the judge suggesting he could be jailed if further breaches continue. US political analyst Eric Ham says Donald Trump is in a face-off with the judge today.
What will certainly send many people in a tizzy is, in fact, if there's a way to actually jail Donald Trump. There are many who believe that it's nearly impossible to actually place a former president in jail because of the fact that there is a Secret Service duty to actually to protect him. So, of course, many people would be watching to see if, in fact, the judge is willing to go that far. And I think what we're seeing here is Donald Trump and this judge in a face-off to actually determine who actually wins, because I think what we're seeing take place is a game of chicken between both of these men right now.
And the Prince and Princess of Wales have released a photograph of their daughter to mark her 9th birthday. Catherine took the photo of Princess Charlotte with a beaming smile. It comes as the family continues to navigate Catherine's cancer diagnosis. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily, and Tom Harwood. Now, we're going to get to some of your views because it seems to be kicking off in the inbox about a discussion we had a little bit earlier, isn't it, Tom?
Certainly is, and lots of people have lots of things to say, so we'll be sure to get to those in just a few moments' time. But we've got reports of other protesters surrounding a bus stop in Peckham now to stop migrants being taken to the Bibby Stockholm barge.
Yeah, it's quite incredible scenes, really. This bus was clearly ready to take migrants who were staying in hotel accommodation in East London, South East London, to the Bibby Stockholm barge. But as you can see, demonstrators wearing masks surrounded the coach before it could pick up the passengers. And there's now quite a large police presence there. We're also hearing reports that they slashed tyres of the bus so that it couldn't go. Also, apparently throwing e-bikes in front of the path.
Well, GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us now for more on this. Because, Olivia, I think a lot of people will be concerned that this is a sign of more to come as the government tries to identify more people, not just to move them to the Bibby Stockholm, but for those crucial Rwanda flights too. Resistance could be a large factor in all of this.
Well, absolutely, Tom. I think the government will be deeply, deeply concerned about what's happening in Peckham today. We have seen so many problems with the Bibby Stockholm policy, which the government installed late last year already. At first, we had migrants having to leave because of various safety concerns. We've had protesters. We've had migrants trying to take the government to court. We've had residents of nearby areas saying that they don't want to have migrants housed in their communities, and this is just going to go on and on and on. And as you say, this is just the beginning, because the Rwanda plan will be getting off the ground in the next couple of months, and we know that there will be huge resistance. We have seen resistance in the House of Commons, we've seen resistance in the House of Lords, and I think we can expect the public too to start kicking up a fuss. Now, in plenty of areas around the country, as the Prime Minister will no doubt remind us time and again, the Rwanda policy is actually very popular, and probably if you poll on the issue, you will see that a majority of the British public are happy to see migrants who have come here illegally deported to Rwanda. But there will be a very vocal minority, probably in urban areas like London, like Manchester, like Birmingham, where this policy is deeply, deeply unpopular. And I think we can expect to see scenes like we're seeing in Peckham today, but far, far worse over the next weeks and months to come.
Yes, and Olivia, we're going to be speaking very shortly to the General Secretary of the FDA, which is the union who are launching legal action against the government's Rwanda plan. They say they need clarity when it comes to the legalities of the whole scheme. What do you know about that?
Well, this is another huge headache for the government. The FDA, which is the Union for Senior Civil Servants, wants to take the government to court over the Rwanda policy on the grounds that they are worried that if they implement the law that the Rwanda bill, which Rishi Sunak just managed to get through Parliament next week, then they could be in breach of international law. And they say that if the government puts them in a position where they are potentially breaching international law, although remember that the government says that it thinks that the Rwanda bill stays just in the boundaries of international law. But if civil servants are put at risk of breaking those international laws, then they believe the government has a case to answer. Now, this is just the last thing that the government needs at this stage. It's taken 5 months between announcing that emergency legislation back in January to even get to this stage. And we are still expecting weeks and weeks and weeks of delays before migrants start leaving for Rwanda in earnest. Yes, there was one migrant who went to Rwanda yesterday, but it was a slightly different set of circumstances. He was a man of African origin, and he agreed to go to Rwanda voluntarily with a £3,000 sweetener from the British taxpayer. So by the time the actual Rwanda scheme is properly implemented in sort of 10 to 12 weeks' time, we will be seeing lots and lots of disquiet from the public, from civil servants, probably from parliamentarians too. Even now it's breached that Commons hurdle. And I think this is going to get more and more and more difficult for Rishi Sunak.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you, Olivia. Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there in Westminster.
Well, as we've been discussing, civil servants have been trying to prevent deportation flights from taking off to Rwanda by mounting this legal challenge against the flagship policy.
Yes, the FDA, which represents senior civil servants, submitted an application for a judicial review over concerns Home Office staff could breach international law by enacting this policy.
Well, who better to speak to about this than the General Secretary of the FDA Union, Dave Penman. Dave, thank you so much for joining us here. A lot of people will be raising an eyebrow, frankly, at this action you're looking to take. Because, of course, the civil service is famously supposed to be impartial. Why is this different, in your view, from taking a view on government policy?
So it's not taking a view on government policy, and we're not trying to prevent flights. What we've been saying to the government since the beginning of March is they've passed legislation which potentially is going to break international law. They've said that ministers may choose to ignore Rule 39 orders, those are injunctions from the European Court, and instruct civil servants to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda despite that order from the European Court. That would be a breach of international law. They're trying to pretend it isn't, but it is a breach of international law, and Parliament has said that civil servants have to obey the law. So civil servants are left in this bind of their professional code, which is a legal obligation on them to uphold the rule of law, and potentially an instruction from minister to break the law. So we've said to them, all you need to do is sort this. Change the legislation, change the civil service code, that's fine, we're out. But they've refused to do so because they had to fudge the legislation to get it through Parliament. They had one group within the Conservative Party that didn't want to flout international law, and another group that was more gung-ho on it. And so instead of resolving that and dealing with that in Parliament, they fudged the legislation and have now kind of landed it onto the lap of civil servants. So we don't want to be in court. We don't want to obstruct government policy because that's not what civil servants do.
But hang on, Dave, you've said, and do correct the record if this isn't what you've said, but you've said this is a political choice from the government made not for the good of the country, but to avoid upsetting either of the warring factions within its own party. Is that not taking a political stance?
No, it's telling you why we're in this position, because the government could clarify this at any point in time. They could amend the Civil Service Code. They could have changed the legislation. This isn't an accident. It's not bad drafting of legislation. It was a deliberate political choice. And we've been saying to them from March, avoid this. Don't put civil servants in this position. Civil servants should never be in a position where they have to choose between acting on the instructions of ministers and obeying the law and the Civil Service Code. They could have resolved it. But they're choosing not to. They have created...
But Dave, surely there's a very simple solution here, and that's to follow our system as it has always existed. And that's the supremacy of Parliament, specifically the supremacy of the Commons. That should come before international obligations. And given that the Rwanda Act, as it is now, disapplies various provisions of the Human Rights Act, surely that should tell us all we need to know.
So absolutely agree with the sovereignty of Parliament. Parliament passed a law which said civil servants have to obey the law. Yeah? And so what that means in terms of the law also includes international law, right? Because that's quite clear in the Civil Service Code as well. So that's why we've got this bind. We've got this bind around a minister potentially saying ignore a court order from the European Court, which would be breaking international law.
Dave, did your union...
So the government needs to resolve this, Tom. I mean, this is entirely solvable by the government.
Dave, did your union take the government to court on prisoner voting?
Why would we have taken the government to court on prisoner voting?
Because the ECHR demanded that prisoners be given the right to vote. The government of the United Kingdom resisted for years. Year after year after year, the government of the United Kingdom resisted implementing that international decree. Surely, if you're a consistent union, you would have taken the government to court on that.
We are a consistent union, and what we deal with, we can't deal with everything the government does. We deal with the issues that our members are facing. And our members who are working in this area are saying they recognise their job is to deport people to Rwanda, and they will do that. And they deport them out of the country time and time again. But they have to know that they are also obeying the law. Why is the government not addressing this? Ask the government why they haven't. They could solve this in a moment, in a heartbeat. They can amend the Civil Service Code now, bring it to Parliament and do a vote that says civil servants have to break international law. But they won't, because they know they can't get that past the Conservative Parliamentary Party. That's why what they've done is fudge it and left it up to civil servants, and that's simply not good enough.
So, Dave, you're saying this isn't about trying to obstruct this policy. This isn't a civil servant being ideologically taking a position on this policy. Do they like the Rwanda plan? Do they think it's potentially workable? What's the view of the people you're representing? Because to me, and I imagine to lots of our viewers and listeners, it does look like you're trying to obstruct this particular policy because you don't like it.
It may do, and that's why this is so objectionable from government, because they know that this is a controversial policy. And they have deliberately put this onto the shoulders of civil servants because they were in a political bind. And civil servants do not want to be in a position where it looks like they're acting politically. I talk to our members who work in government. They will serve the government of whatever colour they are doing. You don't go and work in the Home Office if you don't think you're going to be doing some controversial things. You don't go work in the deportations unit if you don't think you're going to be doing some controversial things. They know that if this bill passed Parliament and it's entirely legal, that's what they're expected to do. But what they didn't expect was the government to fudge the legislation and put them in this constitutional hinterland between their own professional code, backed by Parliament, remember. It's Parliament who says civil servants have to obey the law, including international law, and then the instructions of ministers. Ministers and the government should have solved this. Clear blue water, so there was never any doubt, and we've been saying to them since March to do that, and they've refused to do it, and they've refused to do it because they won't get it past their own party. This is their political bind, and now what they're doing is they're leaving civil servants in this hinterland as a result, and that's why we've now got no choice but to go to court. Government haven't
Interesting. You say you've got no choice now. It just seemed you did have a choice on the issue of prisoner voting. But we're going to have to leave it there, Dave. I'm afraid we've run to the end of this segment. We're going to go to an ad break. But Dave Penman, General Secretary of the FDA Union, thank you so much for talking us through this quite extraordinary position.
Yes, interested to know your thoughts at home. Do you think they have every right to try and seek clarity on this law? Could they be prosecuted?
Or is it really seeking clarity, or is it just causing mischief? Who knows?
Next, we're going to be debating accents. Lots of your views coming in. Some of you have adopted a posher accent, depending on the circumstances. So let us know, should you dumb down, temper your accent in order to get a job?
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is tough love. You're going to take your medicine. It's going to be good for you. You may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported, and not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 1. Now, we asked earlier if people should have to change their accents in order to get by in today's workplace.
Yes, well, joining us now to debate this is the host of Saturday 5, Albie Amonkona, and we are going to be joined by someone else because, Albie, you have a pretty posh accent. Have you ever tried to temper it in order to get a job? Or played it up?
No, I haven't ever tempered my accent. I could say the same for both of you, Tom and Emily. We all have posh accents, don't we? So I'm not really sure whether or not any of us have had much trouble when it comes to getting jobs and having to change our accents. I think, actually, it is a good thing that nowadays we hear a lot more diversity in the way that people speak on television. I think of my colleague, Darren Grimes, on the Saturday 5. 20, 30 years ago, it's not implausible that he wouldn't have got a job on television because of his accent.
Really?
So I actually think accent
He's got
diversity...
a lovely accent. He's got a lovely accent.
I actually think accent diversity is a good thing, and I was quite troubled to hear Bonnie Tyler's comments, and I wouldn't like to think that today people are thinking they have to change their accent in order to get a job, certainly not in entertainment or in any other industry.
Yeah, I think I'll have to agree with you there because it does seem very, very peculiar. Going back only a couple of decades and looking at sort of old clips or full shows that in the media, everyone sounds exactly the same. It's really quite dull.
Yes, they've all got that sort of that BBC English accent. And you had a lot of people that came from other regions of the United Kingdom, not the southeast of the country, where they actually would change their accents in order to fit in order to get jobs in television, jobs in law, jobs in finance. It was this very sort of monolithic British BBC English way of speaking, and I actually think nowadays it's much better that people sound a little bit more different on television, to sound like the people watching us, not just the people who are in charge of us.
Yes, Albie, as you know, we've got lots of regional accents in this studio, in this office space. We took a little bit of a straw poll earlier before we came onto the television, and very divided. Some people saying, yes, I've had to temper my accent a little bit to fit in. Others saying, I will absolutely not, under any circumstances, change my accent just to try and fit in or to improve my career prospects. So this is something about regional pride as well, I think.
Regional pride is important. Look, you get a lot of snobbery about accents in this country. Ultimately, if you can pronounce words properly and use the correct grammar, there's no need to change the way you speak. I think the problems come when people talk with the incorrect grammar, when they're dropping their T's, when they're not pronouncing things properly, that people have issues.
But Albie, there are some accents, there are some regional accents where dropping the T is
part of the lingo.
Intrinsic to that accent. Well, I think of my mother's accent, and she's from the northwest of England, and there are certainly some things that she pronounces differently, but she still pronounces them properly. And this is what I mean. I think you can have any accent in the United Kingdom, still speak properly, still speak with the correct grammar, and get by perfectly.
Right, let's bring James Mathewson in, let's bring James Mathewson here in now. He's appeared there. James, what do you make of this? Do you think people should temper their accent to try and get on with their career?
No. No, I don't think we should. And actually...
It's happening, though. It's happening, James.
It is happening, and believe you me, in the House of Commons, when I was in the House of Commons, I felt the urge to, I felt the need to, and it's absolutely outrageous. It's ridiculous, because it shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case. Our country has a rich and diverse spread of accents, from village to village. I come from Northumberland, and we have Pitmatic language, which is related to the coal mines, which, in village to village, there are different words, expressions, different tones. I mean, I always get called Geordie. I mean, I got called Geordie Jimmy when I was in Parliament. I mean, that was because, I sound like a Geordie. I'm not a Geordie, I'm Northumbrian.
Geordie Jimmy.
You are Geordie because you're from the northeast. There are so many different languages, so many different expressions of language and accent in this country that it's important to protect that and celebrate it. And I think actually saying proper, if we say proper language and proper accent, then what we're saying is that those accents are not proper, and
let's be frank though, there are some very thick regional accents that can be quite difficult for people from other areas of the country to understand. Is that a problem?
Well, yeah, but why would that be a problem? Like, you don't go to another country and say, like, oh, sorry, I can't understand you. You'll
Some
have to
people
speak
might.
English. I mean, some people might, but we call them bigots, don't we? At the end of the day, an idiot. So I think we have to assume the same thing when we come into this country and say, actually, why is there a set standard, and why does it seem to be southern, middle class? Because this is class related as well. Yeah. Don't forget that, because the other thing that people assume a lot of the time, and this was quite interesting when Dominic Cummings was in power, because obviously Dominic Cummings was from Durham as well, and he had this northeast accent, and he had bumped into this a couple of times because he blogged about it, and he had even said at the time that, this idea that somehow he was working class because he had a northeast accent, well, obviously it couldn't be further from the truth. So there's an assumption that a regional accent means that you are somehow from a specific social background as well.
Albie, do you think there are too many poshos on the telly?
I would never say there were too many poshos on the telly. I think all three of us would be out of a job. Look, we've got to be able to understand each other. So I think this is where I might take issue with saying that, well, it's fine for people not to speak properly. There's got to be some sort of common language with which we communicate with each other, and that we can all understand each other properly. Which is why I think when it comes to accents which are particularly thick, if other people can't understand you, that is going to be a problem. But what I'm saying is, across all the different accents in the United Kingdom, there are thicker versions, there are lighter versions, there are still ways that people in other parts of the country can understand each other, and we've got to still be able to understand each other no matter what accent we have.
Harvey, as I would say to you if you're in the northeast of England, me old Mara, right? You need to listen to us, Mel. And you need to say, right, why is it that I need to come to your level and speak like you for you to understand me? Why don't you speak like me for me to understand you?
Very good point. Very good point. That was a great head-to-head. Loved it. Thank you very much, James Mathewson and Albie Amankona. Good to have that debate. Interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting, because I'm forever grateful that we don't have an Académie Française in this country that determines the proper way that words must be used, the proper way that people must speak. It's much more organic in the United Kingdom and free, and that's our tradition.
Oh, they're still there.
Oh, hello.
I thought we were saying goodbye, but clearly you're still on the screen.
We might have one more minute. I mean, what do we do with this? Oodles of time. No,
they're gone now. They've disappeared. I thought that was a good one. What do you think? Do you think if you have a very, very thick accent that some people can't understand, you should temper it in some company? Is it just a natural thing to do sometimes? Some people, when they do it vice versa, less posh, more posh, whatever.
Steve has written in to say that he has changed his accent. Steve says he was driving a van and went into a royal park. A motorcycle cop pulled me over. No commercial vehicles allowed. Now, in his heaviest Dorset accent, just like his granddad, he said, I don't know... Oh, no, I'm going to have to do a Dorset accent. I'm not going to do the accents. I don't know how I got here. A bloody taxi made me turn off down here. Now I is stuck. He looked to heaven and said... Oh, God, just turn around and go back. Thanks, mister. My God, it's a convoluted story.
See, one of our producers is from Dorset. We should have got her here to have a go at it.
Should have done.
Keith says, my dad would put on an over-excessive posh accent whenever we had visitors. I think that does happen sometimes, yeah, and vice versa. If someone's posh and they have their, their plumber or a construction worker over, they might sort of, try and dull the poshness in their tone.
Although my favourite example is when politicians try and sort of drop consonants more often than they usually would. Tony Blair did it prolifically. There were cases of David Cameron and George Osborne doing it too. The one person who never did, of course, was Boris Johnson. If anything, he bumbled it up.
And Martin says, Albie's spot on. Accents, yes. Mispronunciation, no. So there you go. That solves it. gbnews.com/...
Mispronunciation?
Mispronunciation. Anyway, here's your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 711 people were detected crossing the English Channel on Wednesday, the highest number on a single day so far this year, according to Home Office figures. It brings the total number who've crossed so far this year to nearly 8,300. That's 34% higher than the total at the same point last year. A Spanish-Brazilian national has appeared in court charged with the murder of schoolboy Daniel Angerin in north-east London. Marcus Aurelio Orduini Monzo from Newham in London is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of grievous bodily harm. The prosecution alleges the defendant was armed with a samurai sword. Daniel was fatally injured as he walked to school on Tuesday morning. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were injured. Voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling stations, as well as Lib Dems leader Ed Davey, and Reform Party leader Richard Tice was also out casting his vote this morning. Former Deputy Minister John Swinney has confirmed he's running to succeed Humza Yousaf as both SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister. If successful, it will be the second time Mr Swinney, who was Deputy First Minister for more than 8 years under Nicola Sturgeon, has led his party. He previously held the post between 2000 and 2004. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2510 and 1.1692 euros. The price of gold is £1,838 and 90 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,154 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Many of us had some heavy thundery downpours overnight and there's a risk of a bit more thunder to come as we go through today. We have low pressure to the southeast of the UK and then a trailing front across southern parts of England and into Wales brings a lot more cloud as we go through today and some further outbreaks of rain. Some of them could be a little bit thundery at times as we go through into the afternoon, but it's later on that we're going to see the heaviest thundery downpours. Further north across much of northern England, Scotland and into Northern Ireland, a lot of bright, fine and at times sunny weather and some decent temperatures too. Some places getting into the low 20s, though a wind coming in from the North Sea will keep some northeastern parts a bit cooler. Like I said, some heavy thundery downpours developing across central parts as we go through this evening and into the start of the night could cause some localised problems. Further north though, and it's largely dry across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, some clear spells, but Temperatures not dropping a huge amount. In fact, under the clouds, some towns and cities will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start, though, across central southern parts as we go through Friday, and then a spell of rain pushing in from the east across northern parts of England. Southern Scotland could be some thunder mixed in with this as well. However, to the north and the south of these areas of cloud and thundery rain, there's going to be some decent bright and sunny weather, and in any sunshine it should feel relatively warm for northern Scotland and southern England. Elsewhere, a bit cooler under the cloud and rain.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Delays on the M6 northbound in the West Midlands. It's all due to an earlier accident between junction 9 Wednesbury and 10 for Wolverhampton. We're also seeing slow traffic on the southbound side due to onlookers, although all lanes have now been reopened. And nearby, it's slow for the M5 heading northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues on the M3 northbound in Hampshire. It's all due to a two-vehicle accident at junction 6 for Basingstoke. We're seeing slow traffic on the A3 southbound away from London. It's two lanes closed there for an accident between New Malden and Tolworth. And we're also seeing queues on a couple of sections of the A34 in Oxfordshire. Firstly, slow in the roadworks towards the Botley interchange. And we're also seeing slow traffic if you're heading northbound to join the M40 at junction 9 Bicester. And that's the latest traffic and travel.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in. And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
Tom makes me laugh in the breaks. Anyway, it's 1:39. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, John Swinney has announced this morning that he will run for SNP leader, and the race begins to find a replacement for Humza Yousaf following his resignation on Monday.
If Swinney is successful, it'll be the second time, of course, he's led the party after serving as leader of the SNP back in the early 2000s. He had to quit, though, after disappointing election results. He was replaced by Alex Salmond, who was replaced by Nicola Sturgeon.
But yet he thinks he's up for the job again, despite failing last time.
Second time lucky.
But in other news, he's very much the continuity candidate. I think it's fair to say that.
He served as Nicola Sturgeon's Deputy First Minister for a long, long time.
Yes, and as we said earlier, he helped build that coalition with the Greens, which brought down Humza Yousaf in the end. But Kate Forbes, remember Kate Forbes, she's expected to make a statement later today. She's not confirmed yet her intention to enter the leadership contest, but she did fight in the last one. So will she fight again?
Well, joining us now from Holyrood is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. And Tony, this afternoon, it's all eyes on Kate Forbes. Will she, won't she?
Indeed, good afternoon. Certainly, you're right. Everyone is really talking about Kate Forbes, you know, even minutes after John Swinney's event this morning and Grassmarket in Edinburgh. You know, he himself is not exactly known to be a broad-speaking orator, and yet, you know, he definitely had stepped up. In fact, he used those very words. He was stepping up to take this role and to take the SNP into the next election and beyond, for he said, I'm not a caretaker, and he's not an interim, in response, of course, to many comments which thought that perhaps he would just be keeping the seat warm for whoever would eventually take his place. Now, of course, Kate Forbes, you know, she made a huge name for herself, and despite some early stumbles in her campaign last year, you know, she didn't win any public, I suppose, adoration for her initial views on gay marriage. But I think over the course of that 28-day campaign, she certainly made the case of how competent she was and how clever. And indeed, John Swinney today, on his announcement this morning, he said that he hoped to give Kate Forbes her place should she not wish to run, and certainly recognised her intelligence, her creativity, and as well as just her thoughtfulness as a person, certainly characteristics of a deputy, you might say, for somebody who wants to have a trustworthy soul beside them on the campaign trail, whenever that might be. But indeed, we're hearing sort of rumblings that perhaps within the next 60 minutes we will hear from Kate Forbes at Holyrood. Of course, First Minister's questions took place this afternoon, and if yesterday's vote of no confidence from Scottish Labour was a bit of a distraction, then unfortunately today's First Minister's questions was something of a snooze fest in itself, the same old lines from those opposition parties. But Humza Yousaf letting it all brush off him. He's not caring. Certainly, if Kate Forbes doesn't decide to run, then today might very well be his final FMQs here at Holyrood.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you, Tony. Tony Maguire there, our Scotland reporter. Please do keep us up to date if you hear that there will be this statement from Kate Forbes. Very interesting indeed. It's interesting looking at how different these candidates are, Tom, because Kate, for example, she didn't vote on the very controversial gender self-ID law. She was on maternity leave, but she has expressed her concerns about it since. John voted for it. She was conveniently away. Kate did vote for the 2019 climate change law, but she opposed some of the green measures, for example, the deposit return scheme, which proved to be quite controversial too. She's also talked about how it's important to be fiscally prudent and how actually it might not be a good idea to continue to increase taxes on the wealthy in the country, whereas John Swinney seems to be very much establishment, very sort of woke, progressive, in favour of higher taxes, in favour of everything to do with climate change and that lot.
All of the MSPs seem to be sort of galloping behind him, thinking this guy's our saviour, thinking, you know what the SNP needs now, more than anything else? More of the same.
More of the same.
That's what'll help them.
Yes, I was just reading that Westminster leader Stephen Flynn is backing him, the Scottish Health Secretary is backing him, the Education Secretary is backing him, I'm sure lots of others are. But is it time for a change for the SNP, if not Scotland as a whole? Let us know what you make of it. But in other news... In nice news.
Today is Princess Charlotte's 9th birthday. Everyone at GB News here wishes her a very happy birthday indeed.
Yes, everyone. But it is under a week now until Prince Harry visits the UK. Should he see his niece? Because, yes, it's lovely that she's turning 9, but does she have a relationship with her uncle? Does she have a relationship with her cousins? Everything's a little estranged at the moment.
Well, joining us now is royal broadcaster Helena Chards. Helena, frankly, it's unlikely that Prince Harry will meet his niece on his trip.
Absolutely. I don't see it at all. Happy birthday, yes, to Princess Charlotte. Really, really happy, lovely photo. No, I don't think so. He will meet King Charles. I mean, it's a fairly flying visit. Prince Harry is obviously coming over for the Invictus Games service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's. He'll be here. That's on the 8th, celebrating the 10th Invictus Games. I have to say, applaud him for that. That's one of the things we can applaud him for. The sporting event, etc. And he'll be doing a reading. But wouldn't it be lovely if Princess Charlotte could have a lovely hug from her Uncle Harry, but it's not going to happen. There's no way that Prince William will allow that, especially at the moment with Princess Catherine still undergoing treatment. Although we do know, just from a few little bits and pieces we've heard, that Prince William says that everybody's doing well. So I do hope that's the case. And obviously Prince William has been working, which is great. It's the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month, and we saw Prince William at James's Place, which was a mental health place to help men. It's to do with helping men and suicide. So all in all, he's out and about, and for on behalf of Princess Kate as well. But it would be great. I do think Prince Harry has to mend a few bridges or hedges or whatever you call it. He's got to do something to show a little bit of willing. There's been a lot of hurt there, and understandably King Charles wants to see to see his darling boy, it's easier to repair that relationship. But I do feel that Prince Harry has to give a little bit more.
Yeah.
And also a nod to the late Princess Diana, their mother. I mean, they both gave that vow that they would they would stay together through thick and thin, and it would be just wonderful if they could think and work towards that. But now is not the time. I think it will unsettle the family.
Well, yes, and as children get older, they get more curious about their family, don't they? Why haven't I met my cousins? Why haven't I met my uncle and his wife and all of that?
Absolutely, and hopefully it will be the children that mend the relationship, because obviously they want to see each other. And it will be really, really sad for that not to happen. In fact, it will sort of be like a damaged generation, really, if something doesn't work out. But and hopefully King Charles will also give a little push.
Helena, we're just going to cut in because we just want to show the newly released photograph of Princess Charlotte. There it is. There she is. This is taken by the Princess of Wales, her mum, of course, and there she is, sort of leaning on a hedge there.
Slightly leaning on a hedge, but clearly quite outdoorsy image being presented here.
I think it's great. It's very outdoorsy, and the family are very outdoorsy. They like the simple life, and it reflects it in this picture. And she's wearing that cardigan again that we saw on the Mother's Day shot. I know that Kensington Palace have assured us that it's not an edited image, and of course, Princess of Wales has put it out on social media rather than through the picture agencies. But
well, it's lovely. It's lovely, Helena.
It is.
Helena, we're going
to have an honest picture, and it cheers everybody up. Everyone wants to see the lovely Princess Charlotte and not the children.
I think so. Thank you so much, Helena. Helena Charlotte, thank you very much indeed for your time. A lovely little story there.
Yes. Well, coming up, we're going to be not doing anything remotely controversial. We're just going to be having a merry little walk down that row between Daniel Radcliffe and J.K. Rowling. Don't go anywhere.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says that he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash-talked back to stand up and say, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy? If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to.
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this interview in the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry. I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Some breaking news for you now. We were discussing it in the last few minutes, but Kate Forbes has now declared that she's out of the race to become the next First Minister, the next SNP leader. Kate Forbes, the former Finance Secretary, has said she will not run.
Yes, this is very interesting. Lots of people were saying she was going to do it. She was going to throw her hat in the ring. Once again, it would have provided a bit of diversity, or at least a choice. It would have provided a choice for the SNP to choose their leadership. Now it looks like it's going to be a coronation for the continuity candidate, John Swinney. Interesting stuff.
All the questions now will be what on earth has John Swinney offered Kate Forbes in order to see this course of action in the last couple of minutes?
What, you reckon she didn't?
Senior cabinet job.
You reckon she didn't just not fancy it? You think she's probably been given a little sweetener?
I think it would have always been quite hard for her because she's seen as being on the more moderate side of the SNP, perhaps further away from where the Greens are. And if the SNP can't get the Greens on board, they're very unlikely to be able to pass a budget. The government would, frankly, not work. So it has to be someone who's palatable to the Greens, I suppose. But there must have been in the back of her mind this idea. She came within a couple of percentage points of winning the last time. And might it have been a bit smoother for the SNP over the last year if she'd have won it?
Yes, and perhaps she didn't want to lose again. Perhaps she didn't want to lose again. Or maybe there was huge amounts of pressure on her not to run again from some of the SNP members, some of the MSPs up in Scotland. Well, but very interesting. They are very different. Kate Forbes would have provided quite a different policy agenda, I imagine. I get the impression she's far more of a back-to-basics type of politician, focused on fiscal prudence to an extent, not so in hock to the sort of extremes of the climate change lobby. She was critical of the gender self-ID stuff, so perhaps that's a shame for some people in Scotland who wanted a difference of opinion.
But I will be shocked if she doesn't have a senior role in John Swinney's government, assuming there is now a coronation. And if there is now a coronation, this is Humza Yousaf's last First Minister's questions today, but also it sort of has this weird echo of the Tory leadership contest after the fall of Liz Truss, where there was all this discussion, who will stand, could Penny Mordaunt get through, she won't, oh no, it's a coronation, suddenly Rishi Sunak's Prime Minister. There's almost a sort of similar sort of vein here that perhaps many people within the SNP, they want a quick transition, they want it to be tidy, they don't want the mess of a leadership election.
So there we go. Good for Scotland. Another continuity candidate in the place of First Minister. Let us know what you think. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's election channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. Northern parts will stay dry as we go through the rest of today, but further south we have some thundery, showery rain, and that's in association with a front that's trailing across central parts at the moment. And we do have low pressure towards the southeast, and that's brought quite a blustery, breezy theme for many of us. But it is the heavy, perhaps thundery downpours across central parts of England and Wales as we go into the night that's most likely to cause some disruption in a few places. There will be quite a bit of cloud for many of us, but towards northern, northwestern parts of the UK, some clear skies. Despite these, though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Many towns and cities, especially where it stays cloudy, will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start then across some central parts as we go through into Friday. And also watch out for some showery outbreaks of rain which could turn thundery, pushing across northern parts of England and southern Scotland too. To the north of the areas of wet and cloudy weather, there'll be some decent sunshine, so for northern Scotland, and also to the south, so across southern parts of England, I'm expecting some bright sunny weather. And where we see some sunshine, it is going to feel pretty warm, but under the cloud and rain, feeling markedly cooler than it has done recently. As we go into Saturday and the weekend as a whole, there's a fair bit of uncertainty at the moment. It does look like it'll be quite cloudy with some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland and some showers feeding up from the south. And the risk of showers continues as we go through Sunday and into Bank Holiday Monday as well. Could turn heavy and possibly thundery at times.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine, what is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 2 o'clock on what is Thursday, the 2nd of May.
There we go. Continuity candidate John Swinney throws his hat into the ring for the SNP leadership. And breaking news just now, Kate Forbes has pulled out of the race altogether. We cross live to Holyrood next for more on that bombshell announcement.
And Ireland orders the police to man the border after ministers claimed that migrants are flooding in from the UK. Rishi Sunak warns Dublin not to jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement. Oh, how the tables have turned.
And meanwhile, in London, dozens of masked protesters attempt to prevent a bus from moving migrants from a hotel to the Bibby Stockholm barge. We're hearing that things turned violent.
Now, it's not just that Kate Forbes has said she will not be standing to be the next First Minister. There's another half of her announcement that perhaps shows where all of this is going. She's endorsed John Swinney.
Curious, because they are quite different. They are quite different politically, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on gender self-ID, whether it's on fiscal prudence and tax rates. I'm sure there are many other issues where they differ, so that's quite interesting. She's endorsed John Swinney, the continuity Nicola Sturgeon, Humza Yousaf candidate for the top job.
But what could have been going on behind the scenes? What might Kate Forbes have extracted as her price from John Swinney? Could it be a senior government post? Could it be like one of these deals that were done in the 1990s between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown that gave us the TBGBs and that friction at the top of the new Labour government? Could we see perhaps an even less stable SNP government going forward with these two poles at the head yapping at each other?
And this is very interesting. I mean, broader context, what does this mean for independence? What does this mean for the pursuit of independence? Would John Swinney have a better go at it? Would he be able to extract Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom?
Well, given that
what do you reckon?
Last time he was party leader, he had to resign after disappointing election results. So
dream at the moment.
Maybe he's got a lot better in the intervening decade. Who knows?
We shall see. Scotland does like to promote failed politicians. Anyway, gbnews.com/your say. Let us know what you make of it all. What does this mean for Scotland? Are you disappointed that Kate Forbes hasn't stepped up for the leadership? Let us know. But let's get your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2:02. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 711 people were detected crossing the English Channel on Wednesday, the highest number on a single day so far this year, according to the Home Office figures. It brings the total number who've crossed so far this year to nearly 8,300. That's 34% higher than the total at the same point last year. Meanwhile, protesters have surrounded a coach at an asylum seeker accommodation centre in South London, trying to stop them from detaining the migrants set for flights to Rwanda. The activists formed a wall around the coach in Peckham and jammed a rental scooter under the vehicle in order to prevent the vehicle leaving with migrants on board. It's believed the coach was due to take asylum seekers to the Bibby Stockholm Barge accommodation centre in Dorset. It comes a day after the Home Office confirmed that it had started the process of detaining illegal migrants ahead of the first flight to Rwanda, which is to take off in July. A Spanish-Brazilian national has appeared in court charged with the murder of schoolboy Daniel Angerin in north-east London. Marcus Aurelio Orduini Monzo from Newham in London is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of grievous bodily harm. The prosecution alleges the defendant was armed with a samurai sword. Daniel was fatally injured as he walked to school on Tuesday morning. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were injured. Voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling station and Lib Dems leader Ed Davey was also casting his vote, as well as Reform Party leader Richard Tice, who was also out casting his vote this morning. Former Deputy First Minister John Swinney has confirmed he's running to succeed Humza Yousaf as both SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister. It comes as former Scottish Finance Secretary Kate Forbes has confirmed she will not be standing. If successful, it will be the second time Mr Swinney, who was Deputy First Minister for more than 8 years under Nicola Sturgeon, has led his party. He previously held the post between 2000 and 2004. Speaking in Edinburgh a short time ago, he confirmed he would be in the running.
I want to build on the work of the SNP government to create a modern, diverse, dynamic Scotland that will ensure opportunity for all of her citizens. I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence.
In other news, today could be the warmest day of the year so far after heavy rain and thunderstorms hit southern parts of England and Wales overnight. 2 buildings in Sussex were damaged by lightning strikes, according to West Sussex Fire and Rescue. A care home in Elmer was struck with damage to its roof, while a university building in Chichester sustained damage to its roof and power system. Storms hit the southeast, southwest and Wales. The Met Office has warned storms might cause travel disruption and some flooding, leading to difficult driving conditions and some road closures. Violent clashes between police and protesters at universities in the US continue today. Hundreds of riot police have moved in on protesters at the UCLA campus in Los Angeles. About 300 people were arrested during police crackdowns on demonstrations at US universities yesterday. Meanwhile, in the UK, students have set up sit-in camps at some universities to protest Israel's war against Hamas. Students in Leeds, Newcastle and Bristol set up tents outside campus buildings in protest against the war. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have released a photograph of their daughter to mark her 9th birthday. Catherine took the photo of Princess Charlotte with a beaming smile. It comes as the family continues to navigate Catherine's cancer treatment. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Well, as we were just discussing, John Swinney has announced this morning that he will run for SNP leader, and the race begins to find a replacement for Humza Yousaf following his resignation on Monday.
Well, if John is successful, John, that's very familial. If Mr. Swinney is successful, it will be the second time he's led the party. Of course, he had to resign the first time he led the party after some rather disappointing election results.
Yes, very interesting indeed. He's very much a continuity candidate. And also we bring you the breaking news that Kate Forbes has confirmed she will not enter the leadership contest. Is that a wise decision on her part? I mean, should she let the SNP sort of clean up their own mess before she takes over? I don't know.
But of course, she has endorsed John Swinney. So let's get the detail now. From Grassmarket, Edinburgh, is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, oh, I'm sorry, you're in Holyrood. But perhaps that's... Anyway, Tony, what does this all mean?
Good afternoon. Well, yes, about 16 minutes ago, Kate Forbes, she posted her message, quite a mammoth 12-part post on X, and in it she talked through about how she listened quite closely and intently to John Swinney this morning when he announced his intention to run in the race to replace Humza Yousaf. And of course, these two names, Kate Forbes, John Swinney, it's all really everyone's been talking about since about 5 minutes after Humza Yousaf handed in his resignation in front of the nation. Now, Kate Forbes, as we know, she ran last time, and though she came exceedingly close in that second vote system, just behind Humza Yousaf, she did come second, and we wonder whether perhaps she's thought, well, if she runs again this time with a character who is well known and liked within the actual party, would she come in second again, and how would that maybe harm her chances for the next time? For I think after all the discourse this week, it's quite clear that Kate Forbes is capable woman, able to be First Minister, but obviously she has come to this decision that she is not thinking this is the right time. So in that huge post that she put out, I was listening to you just there, you're talking about how different they are, and she has actually come out to say that what emerged was that they actually share a powerful common purpose for the country, which includes a passion to revitalise their party, reach out to those who feel disenfranchised disenfranchised, and also to put, the economy back on the dial, because, of course, a lot of questions being raised about Humza Yousaf's leadership of Scotland in the last 13 months. So it's quite interesting to see, while yes, on paper, these are two extremely different candidates for this role. Indeed, Kate Forbes has now bowed out, and it looks like, bearing any out of from the left field contenders this time next week, we all kind of have the feeling up here now that John Swinney will be our next First Minister of Scotland.
Very interesting indeed. Thanks so much, Tony Maguire, for following everything for us. It's been a chaotic couple of weeks for the SNP and for Scotland as a whole. She does say, Kate Forbes, in her statement, though, that they've agreed that a just transition to net zero must work with and not against our communities and businesses, which is quite interesting. A little bit more of a pragmatic approach to green issues, despite that coalition.
I love this, right? You have people saying, we're going to do net zero. And then you have people on the left saying, we have to do a just net zero. And then people on the perhaps more economically pragmatist side of things say, OK, we're going to do a just net zero, but it has to be a pro-business just net zero. How many more words are we going to add to the pro-business just net zero train? Are we going to... does it have to be... does it have to fit in with any other sort of favourite hobby horse of people? Are we going to add many more words to this chain? Does it have to have
people say, climate change, and they put it with Free Palestine, they put it with LGBTQ issues, they put it with, I don't know, BLM, they put it with all sorts of different activist issues. But I think, yes, maybe perhaps a bit of a word salad there from Kate Forbes. But, let us know what you think. Now, there's loads of stories going around about immigration this morning, whether it's the diplomatic row with Ireland, whether it's the tents being cleared in Ireland. There's huge tent cities in Dublin at the moment, whether it's the Rwanda deportations and the government detaining people to send them. But yesterday, with all this going on, yesterday marked the busiest day for small boat arrivals of this year so far. 711 small boat arrivals in just one day.
Well, it takes the total for the year to 8,278. Now, ironically, that's exactly a third more than last year. And last year, of course, was a third down on the year before, so we're perhaps back to square one. But 14 boats were detected on Wednesday, suggesting an average of 51 people per boat.
Now, a Home Office spokesperson has said the unacceptable number of people who continue to cross the Channel demonstrates exactly why we must get flights to Rwanda off the ground as soon as possible. Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, joins us now. Mark, it's hard to know where to begin with all the immigration stories that are floating around. Of course, the government have put out lots of adverts, I guess you could say, propaganda, you might say too, about how they're detaining people to get them off to Rwanda. But yet we see the numbers are higher than ever.
Yeah, I mean, let's begin with those numbers. The optics could not be worse, really, for the government.
Sorry, Mark, we're going to interrupt you. We've got live pictures of Donald Trump now as he enters the New York courthouse.
So, as you know, late last night we got back from Michigan. We went to Wisconsin and Michigan yesterday. We had tremendous rallies, sold-out rallies. They were packed, and the enthusiasm's never been better, so that was a great thing. And it was nice to be able to campaign one day without being in this ridiculous show trial, Biden trial, I call it. But it was quite a day yesterday, and many of you were there, and I appreciate your being there. I thought the coverage was very fair. The economy, people are asking me about the economy. It's doing terribly, and interest rates are obviously not going to be able to be reduced prior to the election because inflation is roaring back. Gasoline's way up, other things are way up, and it's roaring back like they are very surprised. I'm not surprised, but they're surprised. I guess they're surprised. That's what they say anyway. So that's on the economy. It looks pretty bleak for interest rates, and I don't think there's any way they can cut them because inflation, remember, is a country buster. When you have inflation, that breaks countries. I mean, literally breaks countries, and we can't take that chance. So we'll see what they do, but it was sort of announced yesterday they can't do much with the interest rates. They'll have to remain very high, and it's very unfortunate. We had low interest rates, they have high interest rates, That's very unfortunate. When you compare my economy to this economy, not even a contest. We had the greatest economy in history, and now we have sort of a lousy economy, but the problem with the economy is the inflation. And anything you made, you more than gave back. We call it a 50% tax. It's a Biden tax. It's called an inflationary tax. And it's about 50%, and that's what it is, whether you like it or not, and it's too bad. We're down at the trial now, getting ready to spend another day in the courthouse, which is bogus trial that every leading authority on law says should never have been brought, that Alvin Bragg didn't want to bring it until the election happened, and then he brought it. You just do know that this case could have been brought 8 years ago. Could have been brought 8 years ago. Instead, they wait and wait and wait. They know it's not a good case, and now it's turned out to be they've lost they have no case. They have no case, but we have a very conflicted judge, unfortunately, and so you never know. But other than that, there's no case, and it should have never been brought. But if it was going to be brought, it should have been brought 8 years ago. You know, we're talking about 2015, 2016. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And they wait till I announce, and then they start their action, and then they wait till prime time, Super Tuesday. It all started Super Tuesday, the biggest day, which we won every single thing. I mean, Super Tuesday was a big day for me, but that's when it all really came into being. And who starts a case right smack in the middle of somebody's elections? It should be illegal because it's election interference. So we're going to go in right now, and I will comment just quickly on the colleges and universities. It's a shame. I'm so proud of the New York's finest. They're great people too. I know so many of them. They're incredible. They did a job at Columbia, and likewise in Los Angeles, they did a really good job at UCLA. It was very much embedded. And just so you understand, this is the radical left. This is a movement from the left, not from the right. The right is not your problem, despite what law enforcement likes to say. The FBI director said that he worries about the right. Now, don't worry about the right. The right's fine. Worry about the left, because this is a movement from the left. These are radical left lunatics. And they got to be stopped now, because it's going to go on, and it's going to get worse and worse. And, you know, they take over countries, okay? And we're not letting them take over the USA. We're not letting the radical left morons take over this country. You can't let that happen. And the law enforcement and the people at DOJ, instead of going after Donald Trump, they ought to look at what's happening in their own offices, because you're loaded up with radical left people that want this country to fail. And we're not going to let this country fail. Thank you very much.
What does a fair election look like to you? Right.
Donald Trump there ostensibly talking about his court appearance, but also talking about the presidential election to quite a degree as well.
And the radical left lunatics, in his words. He was talking a lot about them, a lot about the economy too. I heard the word economy many, many times. He says this is all a sham, continues to say it's a bogus trial. It's day 10. Day 10.
Yes, he did find a little bit of time to talk about the trial that he was actually there for.
Yes.
He said that there was, the judge was conflicted, which seems like, I don't know if you'd be allowed to say that in this country and still, well, I mean, he doesn't really help himself, does he? If I was the judge sitting who had to make the decision on this, and Donald Trump's just said this, that and the other about me, I mean, my goodness.
Well, he's not very happy about this unconstitutional gag order, in his words, unconstitutional. He said, of course, the case could have been brought 8 years ago, but they waited. That's what he says. Anyway, now we rudely interrupted Mark White, our Home and Security editor. He was just about to answer, or you were mid-flow, actually, Mark. Tell us about the latest on Migration Nation.
Yeah, just talking about these record figures, 711 migrants crossing the English Channel illegally yesterday, and the optics are terrible for the government in terms of the timing here, because this really was supposed to be a week in which the government was determined to show momentum finally in the long-stalled Rwanda policy. Having just gained royal assent, that Rwanda bill meant that the government could now prepared for those first flights to fly off to the East African country in about 2 to 3 months' time. And as such, just yesterday, the government announced, in the form of the Home Office, announced that the operation to start rounding up these asylum seekers. The first cohort who will go to Rwanda was underway. 800 immigration enforcement officers, we were told, involved in that. And on that very same day, 711 crossed the English Channel in a move that effectively reverses the gains that were made last year when they were a third down on the numbers that crossed compared to the year before. Now this year we're a third ahead of last year, completely cancelling out those gains. Now the government might say that, well, look, none of the flights have gone off to East Africa yet, so wait and judge us when the Rwanda policy is up and running. But this is the very same government, the same ministers who are already trumpeting the success of Rwanda in pushing lots of asylum seekers down to the Republic of Ireland, according to the government in Dublin. So you can't have it both ways. Regardless, we had a record day yesterday. It just goes to show you the very significant challenges that the government will have as they hope clearly that the Rwanda policy will be a deterrent to trying to stop these people crossing the channel in the first place.
Huge challenges, and just think about the cost to the taxpayer too. Over 700 people in just one day who have to be accommodated, fed, paid for through the whole asylum system process, unless they're, you know, detained and deported to Rwanda, which hasn't happened yet. God, the costs are mounting. Thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security editor.
Well, up next, chaotic pro-Palestine protests in America. Well, they've now been imported to the United Kingdom. Are young people acting as useful idiots for extremists? That's what the mayor of New York seemed to suggest yesterday. Don't go anywhere.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Sacre bleu. French police used knives to sink asylum seekers' boats in Dunkirk before an army of migrants then go on to overpower tear gas cops and ride on another dinghy to the UK. So this is very dramatic. So the French authorities have been accused in the past of being too soft on migrants. They haven't done enough to stop the boats. On Tuesday, we had the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl. Really awful scenes where one group of migrants kind of boarded another group's boat and people were just killed in the crush. So they're now taking this very sort of action man, Bear Grylls kind of thing. They're wading into the surf with a great big knife and just slashing the dinghies, which does seem kind of obvious, doesn't it? It seems like a good move. Apparently, up to now, they haven't wanted to get involved. They haven't wanted to have violence with the migrants. But this is their new plan.
British taxpayers have been paying them hundreds of millions of pounds or euros to deal with this, and now finally they're able to deal with this, obviously on the back of an incredible tragedy. This tragedy can be utilised by both sides in terms of, like, however they want to use it. We need to open up more the borders or ensure that there's safety here, and then other people say, let's prevent this from happening by stopping them getting in the water in the first place. So everybody's going to use it, but taking your point, Nick, and maybe moving to the question, Cressida, do you think that people are, and when I say people, I don't mean just the GB News audience or people on the right, or just across the spectrum, are coming to appreciate that this is a real issue that has to be grappled with in a mature fashion, which starts with conversation without accusations of you being racist?
Well, maybe, but I think most people have known that for a long time. I mean, the reason Rishi put it in his pledges was because people knew it was a big deal and then just continued not to address it.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2. Now, students in the UK have set up sit-in camps across universities here in Britain to protest Israel's war against Hamas.
Yes, rather copying what's happening in the States, I fear. There are reports coming in from Leeds, Sheffield and Newcastle from those campuses.
Well, that's after the 300 arrests in New York alone, with those United States pro-Palestinian protests attracting riot police from coast to coast.
It's quite extraordinary, actually. So joining us now to discuss this is Errol Moorcoach from Republicans Overseas. Errol, I'm hoping you can give us some insight into what's going on in the States. As we speak, there is still a police presence, there are still tents, there are still protesters, very much there. Bring us the latest.
Well, the latest actually kind of goes back to what happened 4 years ago with the election around Donald Trump. Not to give these students and these sort of malcontents a free pass, but in many of these cases, you're seeing a lot of outside agitators. You're seeing coordinated Marxist movements, much like occurred when I was a student at UC Berkeley, where you go into the protest, you go into these occupied zones, whatever they are, the flavor of the week for each generation, and you realize half these people are not students, and there's a lot of outside funding. And that outside funding, coupled with these sort of vocal, malcontent PC individuals, has created this tinderbox. And this tinderbox is viral, as in it's spreading from university to university. We used to only
I'm reading here that the police, Errol, are using stun grenades to clear the camp at the UCLA. I mean, stun grenades.
Only because of the grave danger that they're facing. They're not going up against just students. They're going up against masked bandits who don't have any identification, who sworn violence, who are chanting, very violent slogans toward the police. I won't repeat any of them. And these officers are going in there risking their lives to basically bring public property back under control of the public. Right now,
is it Antifa, do you think? Is Antifa involved, that far-left organisation?
Yes, Antifa is always involved, especially when it comes to campus organizations. Again, when I was a student at Berkeley, we had Antifa brought into the university to speak in our classes before the lectures, predating the riots that would go on at night. And that goes on throughout the entire UC, which UCLA is a part of. So the idea that Antifa is there is like saying that there's, roaches in the sewer. It's guaranteed. And they're very similar, as in they both have almost no value to our society, and they're attempting to destroy our, the best institutions we have. The best things we have in America is this great liberal education system, and it's been completely cannibalized by these fake liberals who've now put it into a serious police escalation situation, and they've been very violent. They've been very, let's say, vocal in their demands, but oftentimes you've seen the videos when they get pressed on the nitty-gritty. Why are you here? What exactly are you saying? They have no idea what they're doing because they're not involved. They're being used.
I mean, Errol, we're seeing a very small version of what you're seeing in the States on campuses in the UK, the odd tent, some protesters who have been very vocal. There have been complaints on quite a few campuses about anti-Semitic chants and the like. What's your warning then to us in the UK?
Thank you for giving me the chance. The warning is that if you keep down this line of fire, your institutions will become corrupted and bankrupted, as is happening in the United States. You're going to see the venerable British institutions. Keep in mind, I did my postgrad in St. Andrews. I'm a huge fan of your university system. And to see that this could happen here and what's happened in the U.S., your voters and constituents and everybody in your country should be terrified, horrified, mortified of copying the American failure that has been academia.
Errol, what do you say to those who would point to the history of student protests? I mean, after all, it was Ronald Reagan as governor of California in 1969 who had to send in the state guard to turf out protesters at UC Berkeley. I mean, this has been going on for decades and decades and decades, and ultimately, people grow out of it.
Absolutely, they do grow out of it. The data shows it. I think the issue now is that, yes, students have the right to protest and occupy in student buildings, as they did in Berkeley when Reagan came down and put the kibosh on it, was effectively the main operational modality for these protests. However, they've crossed over from Occupy, sit-ins, hunger strikes, and they've become violent. They've become unsafe. They've become fire hazards. They have definitely crossed the line from, all speech is protected in the United States. Hate speech is protected. That's fine. But these are private universities, and there's other students there. So they've crossed the line on private discourse, and it's gone from being a protest to being a violent, seditious, terrorist-inspired, let's go with, encampment. And as an encampment, as we saw with the Occupy Wall Street encampments back in 2009 and 10, they devolved into very dirty, unclean, and unsafe places. And this isn't really the same kind of protest. But I will concede that students should have the right to protest. And if they want to take over a building peacefully, that's traditional. But what they're doing here is not that.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Errol Mulcoach, great to speak to you from the Republicans overseas. Now, our GB News reporter, editor, Anna Riley, joins us now. Anna, thank you very much. Tell us where you are and what you're seeing.
Hello, I'm here in Sheffield, and there's been a collaboration between the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam University as part of the Sheffield Campus Coalition for Palestine. They've set up several tents outside the University of Sheffield Students' Union, gazebos as well, Palestine flags, writing as well. Palestine should be free, both on boards and chalk written on the ground. There's also about 20 to 30 students there gathered. One of them I saw with a megaphone. He was giving that chant from the river to the sea. They believe that Sheffield University is complicit in funding arms to Israel as part of the Israel-Gaza war, and that's what they say they're standing against. It has been peaceful, though, from what I have seen, not like the violence that we've seen breaking out in America. And it was obviously, as we'd been hearing from our previous guest there, as violence broke out on the other side of the Atlantic yesterday, students at Russell Group universities like Sheffield, Manchester, Leeds, Bristol and Newcastle have pitched up these tents and erected the anti-Israel sign, saying that their actions had been inspired by those in America.
Well, I hope at least they're getting their coursework and university work done at the same time. Anna, we're going to have to leave it there because we're pressed for time, but really great to speak to you and interesting to see the pictures there. It's on a smaller scale so far, and smaller scale.
I'm sure they're sitting there in their tents doing their required reading. I'm sure they're sitting there in the lovely sunshine, studiously studying.
Yes, we're going to be back very quickly with more on this. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
It's 2:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. 711 people were detected crossing the English Channel on Wednesday, the highest number on a single day so far this year, according to Home Office figures. It brings the total number who've crossed so far this year to nearly 8,300. That's 34% higher than the total at the same point last year. Meanwhile, protesters have surrounded a coach at an asylum seeker accommodation centre in South London to try and stop the detaining of migrants set for flights to Rwanda. The activists formed a wall around the coach in Peckham and jammed a rental scooter under the vehicle in order to prevent the vehicle leaving with migrants on board. It's believed the coach was due to take asylum seekers to the Bibby Stockholm barge accommodation in Dorset. A Spanish-Brazilian national has appeared in court charged with the murder of schoolboy Daniel Angerin in north-east London. Daniel was fatally injured as he walked to school on Tuesday morning. Marcus Aurelio Orduini Monzo from Newham in London is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of grievous bodily harm. Voters are heading to the polls today in a series of local elections across the country. There are elections in 107 local authorities across England, as well as 11 mayoral races. A by-election will elect a new Blackpool South MP following the resignation of former Conservative Scott Benton. Police and crime commissioners will also be chosen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been out and about campaigning today. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer was at the polling station, and Lib Dems leader Ed Davey as well, as is Reform Party leader Richard Tice, who was also out casting his vote this morning. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Many of us had some heavy thundery downpours overnight, and there's a risk of a bit more thunder to come as we go through today. We have low pressure to the southeast of the UK, and then a trailing front across southern parts of England and into Wales brings a lot more cloud as we go through today, and some further outbreaks of rain. Some of them could be a little bit thundery at times as we go through into the afternoon, but it's later on that we're going to see the heaviest thundery downpours. Further north, across much of northern England, Scotland and into Northern Ireland, a lot of bright, fine and at times sunny weather, and some decent temperatures too. Some places getting into the low 20s, though a wind coming in from the North Sea will keep some northeastern parts a bit cooler. Like I said, some heavy thundery downpours developing across central parts as we go through this evening and into the start of the night could cause some localised problems. Further north though, and it's largely dry across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, some clear spells, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. In fact, under the clouds, some towns and cities will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start, though, across central southern parts as we go through Friday, and then a spell of rain pushing in from the east across northern parts of England, southern Scotland. Could be some thunder mixed in with this as well. However, to the north and the south of these areas of cloud and thundery rain, there's going to be some decent bright and sunny weather, and in any sunshine it should feel relatively warm for northern Scotland and southern England. Elsewhere, a bit cooler under the cloud and rain.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 westbound in West Yorkshire. There's a lane closed there for a broken down vehicle. It's between junction 28 Tingley and 27 for Gildersham. Queues in Oxfordshire on the A34. Firstly, very slow southbound into the roadworks at the Botley interchange. Estimated travel time around 30 minutes. We're also seeing queues northbound on the A34 towards junction 9 of the M40 at Bicester. Still queues on the M3 northbound in Hampshire following an earlier accident at junction 6 for Basingstoke. It's also slow on surrounding routes. And in Suffolk, we're seeing queues on the A14 as a result of an accident involving 2 lorries. So it's been closed westbound at junction 49 Stowmarket and eastbound between 47 Woolpit and 49 Stowmarket. And that's the latest traffic and travel.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
Right now, shocking scenes from Peckham. Protesters are blocking a coach that was set to take asylum seekers to the Bibby Stockholm barge. Now, what you can see now is a rather large group of people, and I must say it seems to have multiplied. Many have their faces covered entirely.
Now, this is, of course, a pretty stark example of the problems that the police face. It looks like they're wildly outnumbered there, despite there being a solid number of police officers, 2 police vans, at least from this shot. People are simply ignoring the police.
Hang on, let's be frank, the police aren't doing anything. By the looks of things, the police aren't moving them on. Doesn't appear to have been any arrests, although we'll keep an update on that, of course. I mean, GB News presenter Patrick Christie's has been down there earlier today, and he says that it's just been like this. More people have come. There's been scuffles. We were hearing reports of there's tyres on the bus being slashed, e-bikes being thrown under the bus to prevent it from departing, of course. And this group of activists seems to have grown and grown.
Of course, it is.
They're having fun and dancing.
It is illegal to block a highway. So you'd think that there could be some action taken here, but the police are simply standing there.
James Cleverly, our Home Secretary, has said housing migrants in hotels costs the British taxpayer millions of pounds every day. We will not allow this small group of students posing for social media to deter us from doing what is right for the British public. Well, isn't that exactly what's happening here? They are actually stopping the government from implementing their policy here, but hey, they look like they're having a good time, banging the drums. They've got their COVID masks on. Some of them sat down.
That they're all wearing those masks. Is this to hide their identity?
I think so. I think so. I'm not sure they're worried about diseases, but, you know, maybe you're there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, if I know anything about Freshers' flu, I'm pretty sure they're not worried about diseases. But no, it does look absolutely peculiar. It reminds me of the Extinction Rebellion protests of the summer of 2019 and 2018. It was just... You couldn't move through a lot of London, and it was just people brazenly sort of taking over areas that they suddenly demanded were theirs, suddenly ignoring any sort of rules by which we normally expect of a civilised society.
And I don't know where So this is outside a hotel in London, which was being used for migrant accommodation. The government want to transfer those people to the Bibby Stockholm barge. I'm not sure where the migrants are now. I don't know if they're still in the hotel, whether they were moved onto the bus and then taken off because of all this drama and protest. But it's difficult for the Home Secretary to say we're not going to allow this to deter us.
I suppose from an operational police perspective, what they'll be doing here is just thinking, you know what
do we do?
There's a bunch of students here. They're going to get bored eventually. We don't have to take this busload of migrants down to the Bibby Stockholm today. We'll do it tomorrow instead.
Yeah.
And these students can just sit there and have their little sing-song, and actually, you know what, we'll get on, and it'll be easier for everyone if we just do it tomorrow.
Gosh, imagine if you lived there. It'd be a right pain in the behind, wouldn't it?
But what if an ambulance needs to get through?
Yeah, what if an ambulance needs to get through? But anyway, those are the scenes from Peckham in south-east London. The government is finding it terribly hard to enact their migration policies. But yes, we'll bring you more as we get it.
In other news, the Co-op Arena in Manchester, it's supposed to be the largest new music arena in the country. Well, it's had to postpone several events now, a further one today, after a series of technical issues in the troubled arena.
Now, apparently this arena has cost something like £365 million, and some of these cancellations have really upset people because they've been right at the last minute, including for concerts with the singer Olivia Rodrigo. That was after technical and safety issues were identified. What's going on?
Well, joining us to tell us exactly what's going on of the latest surrounding this troubled arena is the sports journalist Chris Scudder. Chris, this was supposed to open quite a while ago with Peter Kay. That was cancelled. This is supposed to be the largest arena in the country, but they simply can't get it off the ground.
Yeah, safety stuff. I mean, it's predictable, really. But yeah, I mean, you feel sorry for all the fans that have been trying to get in. The guy, I won't try and pronounce the name. The guy with the hoodie. They were queuing outside on Wednesday, I think, and told to go home, which is appalling, really. How can that happen? People spending all that money to get there. Yeah, loads of big gigs coming up. I mean, they've got some legends like the Eagles coming up. They've got Eric Clapton, Billie Eilish. Should have been opened already, and there is a big sporting event coming up as well, but it's not till the end of July. That's UFC, MMA, mixed martial arts, big ultimate fighting championship event, which they will hope goes ahead. But it's a shambles, you're right.
Chris, we're looking at it here, and might I just take this opportunity to say what an ugly building it is? Perhaps
do you know what?
Perhaps, given that they're not opening it yet, they could sort of have a bit of a revamp of the design. My goodness me, if I was the Co-op, I wouldn't want my brand stuck on this ugly black box.
Yeah, well, the City Football Group as well. You can see the picture there in the background is the Etihad Football Stadium. This is part of the Manchester City Football campus, though City only partially involved. There's a group called the Oakview Group who are responsible for getting events on. I think they are the ones who have to answer the questions, and they put a statement out so far saying that, you know, basically there's a problem with the ducting and stuff has been falling down. Now, you can't have 23,000 people inside an event like that. There's basically a standing floor where you're watching rock groups. Now, I mentioned the UFC, that the MMA event coming up at the end of July. They would have the equivalent of the boxing ring, what they call the octagon, right in the middle there. So, you know, you can imagine if stuff's dropping down, it's not going to happen.
Not
but
what you
that's
want,
3
no.
months away. That's 3 months away.
I mean, Chris, was this stadium supposed to be sort of this eco-friendly, sustainable, visionary type of stadium? And actually, it turns out it's quite tricky.
Yeah, listen, I mean, listen, things get put back, we know that, but I mean, it's really not good to be having fans standing outside and having to call things off at the last moment. Now, you know, Manchester City wouldn't want their name associated with that, and they say they're only partially involved. Yeah, Harry Styles is involved in this as well.
Really?
And the cooperative, which goes right back to the 19th century. It's all about giving stuff back to the community. That's the idea, sustainability. They've got solar panels on the roof, they're redirecting rainfall, all that kind of thing. So it's all funky, it's very green, it's very 21st century, but you know, when construction, sometimes you can't get it done, but you know, if you're selling tickets, quite simply, you've got to get it on.
Yeah.
And there's some big events coming on, and those fans who have been standing outside the last few days, Olivia Rodrigo this weekend, you know, she's massively popular, you know, and it's not going to happen.
No.
You know, the artists are not happy either.
Very disappointing, and lots of people will have not only paid for tickets, but also accommodation, travel. They were
everything.
literally about to go into the stadium just to be told, hang on, mate,
Sorry,
it's not going
there
ahead.
are things falling from the ceiling.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, goodness me.
Chris Scudder there, sports journalist. Good to speak to you. Yes,
You know what they
lots
should
of
have done?
disappointed people. You can't just call a building ugly, Tom.
It is an ugly building. It's a stupid,
Beauty.
boxy building.
Beauty is in the eye of the
Do you
beholder,
know what it
isn't
should
it?
be? It should be an enormous sphere.
Oh,
I'd be
gosh.
very happy if it was a big sphere with screens all the way outside. Forget the solar panels. It should be... What I'm referring to, of course, is the scheme that certain politicians in London cancelled.
This is one of Tom's hobby horses. He wants the sphere, but it's been axed, so there you go. Now, we're going to take a quick break, but up next, we're going to be talking about the BBC and its curious weather maps. Are they trying to perpetuate the idea of an emergency, a climate emergency, global boiling?
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently,
Yeah.
the Princess Royal.
She's
She just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of royalty protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes to 3. Now, the BBC is in the hot seat. See what we did there? The hot seat over the colour scale it uses to represent temperature on its weather, with lows of 11 degrees shown as yellow, while 41 degrees is depicted as dark red.
Well, that would make sense.
That would
41
make sense.
degrees
41
is very hot indeed.
Very hot. What are we talking about? 15 degrees and 18 degrees looks very hot. But I think there was a map that showed 15 degrees as some of the darkest, deepest colours.
Now, the colour scheme was introduced in 2017. The BBC at the time said it was intended to help those with colour blindness. But some say that yellow or orange, to represent a temperature as low as 11 degrees, is going a bit far and wondering whether there's an agenda behind it.
And where has all the blue gone?
Where has the blue gone?
It's all been
It's never
changed.
cold. Never cold.
Well, we're joined now by the meteorologist and author Jim Dale. Jim, are people just getting a bit overexcited about this, or is there genuinely a problem here of representing 11 degrees in a sort of warm colour? I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it?
11 degrees isn't warm.
Some facts for a second. This is the Meteo Group in not the Met Office, so there's a bit of a difference. So the one thing that's lacking between all the weather operators, if you like, is a little bit of consistency. They're on their own, I guess, in terms of what they decide, and different organisations decide different things. But to be honest, this thing has been battered around on social media for some time now. And you know what? I just think it's... can I say this? It's a red herring. It really is a red herring, because I think, to be honest with you, anybody can work these things out. They can look at the figures. If they can't understand the crayon colours, then the figures are there for good reason.
Yeah, but Jim, you know as well as I do why it winds people up. It winds people up because people think that the BBC or the company behind these weather maps is trying to promote the idea that our country is on fire, that it's far too hot than it should be, that we're having heat waves when the temperature goes above 15 degrees. Can you see that, Jim?
To a degree, I can, but not. I mean, it's like jumping on a bandwagon. It's like jumping on that conspiracy theory. I can see it, but I don't think it means a jot. What means a jot is actually what's going on, and it might not necessarily be this country at this time, or even the last 2 or 3 months. It's been relatively cool to warm, and that's about as good as it's got. But there are other places in the world that, to be honest with you, I don't know whether purple would be at the top end or at the bottom end of the scale, cold or very hot, the dress that you're wearing. There's places like Cambodia last week saw their highest temperature ever, and not just Cambodia, but Thailand, day after day after day, parts of Africa. It'll soon be to the United States. So these temperatures are very real.
Oh, yeah, Jim, I think we'd all understand if it was 45 degrees to have a red blob around London, if it was, absolutely boiling and there was a genuine heat wave. Not so much when it's 18, 19 degrees, but we'll have to... Jim, we have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. We've come to the end of the show. We'll have to talk again about this because it is an interesting one and it does get people talking. Why is it orange and red when it's not very hot?
Oh, goodness me. Of course, people will be able to see how GB News do it, or at least how the Met Office do it for GB News when we get to the weather in just 1 minute's time. But before then, Martin Daubney is up next.
Hang on, let me just say that tomorrow I'm on with Gloria De Piero.
Yes.
Tom Harwood is on all night tonight doing the local elections. So he's going to be on all night, so don't miss it. But Martin, what's coming up on your show?
Well, Jim Dale was certainly seeing red there, wasn't he? He could do with taking a chill pill. Is it time for Rishi to admit he can't stop the boat? 711 yesterday, 45,000 since he was the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, borderline insanity in Ireland. They're deploying 100 cops to stop asylum seekers crossing the border. Well, there were 35,000 during the Troubles. Good luck with that. Donald Trump has just said radical left morons are taking over our country. We must stop them. Is the same true here? They're stopping coaches leaving Peckham. Is it time to send in the water cannons? You think it is? Anyway, now it's time for your weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar.
sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. Northern parts will stay dry as we go through the rest of today, but further south we have some thundery, showery rain, and that's in association with a front that's trailing across central parts at the moment. And we do have low pressure towards the southeast, and that's brought quite a blustery, breezy theme for many of us. But it is the heavy, perhaps thundery downpours across central parts of England and Wales as we go into the night that's most likely to cause some disruption in a few places. There will be quite a bit of cloud for many of us, but towards northern, northwestern parts of the UK, some clear skies. Despite these, though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Many towns and cities, especially where it stays cloudy, will hold up in double figures. A bit of a wet start then across some central parts as we go through into Friday. And also watch out for some showery outbreaks of rain which could turn thundery, pushing across northern parts of England and southern Scotland too. To the north of the areas of wet and cloudy weather, there'll be some decent sunshine, so for northern Scotland, and also to the south, so across southern parts of England I'm expecting some bright sunny weather. And where we see some sunshine, it is going to feel pretty warm, but under the cloud and rain, feeling markedly cooler than it has done recently. As we go into Saturday and the weekend as a whole, there's a fair bit of uncertainty at the moment. It does look like it'll be quite cloudy with some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland and some showers feeding up from the south. And the risk of showers continues as we go through Sunday and into Bank Holiday Monday as well. Could turn heavy and possibly thundery at times.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across